So greetings everyone. My name is Brother Dr. Dennis Rogers, and I'm sitting here with Brother Dr. Aminifu R. Harvey, and this is the first of several series entitled Black Excellence. So Brother Aminifu R. Harvey, doctor in social work, has invited us into his beautiful home, which is literally a museum. Thank you for inviting us, having us
pleasure.
in your space.
And look, if you hang around long enough, you will have a museum too. You just have to hang around a long time, right?
Yes.
And appreciate the arts.
Absolutely. So Brother Dr. Harvey has an illustrious history and a vibrant present and an even more vibrant future. And what we'll do is start to unpack his excellence and talk about his upbringing and the things he's been able to accomplish in his short, well-lived life thus far. Brother Dr. Harvey, where are you from, and how did you come to at least this space in the city we're in now, Durham, North Carolina?
Durham, North Carolina.
Yes.
Well, I don't know if we have enough time to go through all that, but I was originally born in Jersey City, New Jersey.
Okay.
My parents came up from Louisiana.
Nice.
So I was I was raised up south. And my mother's really interesting. She played the piano, and she had the opportunity. She had a scholarship to go to either Southern or Grambling for music.
Yes.
But her father had passed, so she wasn't able to go. My mother ended up getting her degree at the age of 55 years of age.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And my father was a factory worker. My mother was also a seamstress, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they both worked hard. And my father worked in Western Electric factory, but was in the evening a barber. And then he retired and he had his own barbershop.
Excellent.
So the hard work piece, they were great models, and so were my other relatives. But I think I'm probably the first one, if not to attend college, one of the first, but I think maybe the first one in that sort of immediate extended family to graduate from college.
Right.
You know.
Now, before we go into your college years, tell us a little bit about your intellectual exposure as a young person, to have the variety of interests you had, with a mother as a pianist, a father as a barber, as well as a laborer. Tell us about that.
Well, I think you also have to include my friends.
Yes.
Brother moved on my block when we were latter part of elementary school. Kenneth Howard, but his nickname was Spanky.
Okay.
I think Spanky was born 6 feet, weighing 200 pounds.
Wow.
And I'm like 5'9". Well, at that time, maybe 5'7". I'm about 5'9" now. And in high school, they called me the thin man because I was so skinny.
Right.
But Spanky was well-mannered, so my parents always felt comfortable allowing me to go out with Spanky. Sometimes we hit the end of the block and go our separate ways.
Okay.
We hung out in New York a lot. We hung out in the Lower East Side at that time. Slugs, if you remember, is where the young trumpet player, I can't remember his name now, got killed. We were, for both of us at that time, on the Lower East Side, off and on, I stayed with Malcolm's bodyguards after Malcolm was killed. A lot of people coming back from civil rights movement. Cooper Union on Friday would have lectures. So for me, the world is beginning to open up, and this is like in the early 60s. My father was a union person and progressive. He was progressive. So I'm beginning to have a mentality of activism at a very early age. I'm reading a lot of Baldwin's work, right? It was probably, for me, the first real black literary person that I read somewhat consistently.
Yes.
So my ideas in the world and this whole movement, civil rights movement, black movement is having a major effect upon my views and my philosophy of the world.
So what I just heard you say is there was a confluence of influences that included spending time in New York, in and around the jazz spaces,
Some of the jazz spaces,
being around Malcolm X's bodyguards and others.
Yeah. After Malcolm's killed.
After Malcolm.
Living with some of them.
Living with them.
Yeah.
Wow. Having a father who was a union man and a union organizer.
Wasn't so much organizer, but he was a participant. I remember they went on strike, and I remember my father being on strike. I remember my father read the Daily News every day.
Okay.
My father was the first person to ever tell me that the United States was basically a military-industrial complex.
Wow.
You know, what I don't know if I understood what that meant at that time, but he was the first person to ever tell me that.
Amazing.
Yeah,
Amazing.
yeah.
And then with your mother again being a pianist and a seamstress, I can imagine there was an appreciation for music, as well as I see you have a very beautiful attire on, as well as finery.
Well, the finery piece, I mean, they were rather sophisticated in terms of coming out of the South until both of their parents died. Males died when they were rather young. They were probably a black middle class in the South, you know, rather refined. Well, my father had to work pretty hard after his father died. I always think that maybe he was murdered, his father, because he owned a butcher shop, you know. Now, jeez, that was probably in the middle or early 30s.
Wow.
His horse and buggy gets hit by a car. How many cars were they have? You know, but the butcher shop, he supplied the meats to the major hotels, so one wonders about that.
Amazing.
You know, so.
And then you add to what you said earlier, not to go back too far there, you add to this that you were living this experience and you're reading James Baldwin,
Yeah, that's
which
one
is
of the people,
influencing your thinking as well.
Yeah, and I went to an all-white elementary school.
Okay.
The first experience I remember with racism, I'm not sure I had that label at that time. I'm in the first grade. There are about 5 first grade classes with 20 to 30 students in each one.
Okay.
You know, Catholicism was very big in Jersey City at that time, and probably, especially on the East Coast, very large. I mean, you had the school, the elementary school, you had the rectory, you had the convent, and on Sunday you had a 6 o'clock mass, 7 o'clock mass, 8 o'clock mass, 9 o'clock, 10, 11, and 12. So you had a large congregation. And I do remember that the priest, I can't remember exactly what his title was, but he was getting ready to retire. So the students were putting on a play, and there were a lot of animals in the play.
Okay.
Right? I don't remember all the details of the play. And at the dress rehearsal, if you did not know your line, they would say, "Anybody in the audience know that line?" And they would come and put you in. So there were a lot of people who didn't know their line. And I kept raising my hand, I never got called on to be in the play.
What's going on here?
And I do think that affected me in terms of wanting to memorize things for the rest of my life.
Interesting.
You know.
Interesting.
So that was probably a first encounter. I have to say, though, I didn't remember any real direct racism in my whole 8 years I was there. It was probably some subtle stuff, but I didn't pay
It
attention.
didn't register as a pain moment for you.
Right. Okay. And the interesting thing, I had probably in the 7th, 8th grade, you know, we had to wear a coat and tie and everything.
Yes.
So the elementary school was on the border of sort of the white-black community.
Okay.
One day, we had an hour for lunch. So it had to be 7th, 8th grade. And Francis Bacon, not the Francis Bacon.
Famous author. Right.
Francis Bacon. Well, I said, "Come on, walk me home for lunch." And the walk home for lunch was probably about 15 minutes. But it was all through the black neighborhood.
Okay.
And everybody at that time, the main street, everybody's out. So we're walking, and I'm saying hi, hello, nod. He said, you know all these people? I said, no, I don't know any of them. He said, but you're speaking. I said, yeah, but that's what we do.
Right.
Those are my early memories of the cultural piece and probably the juxtaposition of European, Eurocentric, American white culture and your African oriented culture where we speak to everybody.
Right.
And where they didn't. So there's some, yes.
Okay. So what was a trigger for you to decide to go to college, and what were your early years like in college?
You know, I have a brother and sister. My sister's a little older than me. She went to nursing school.
Okay.
My brother is more than a little younger than I am. The trigger to go to college. Spanky, right? My best friend. Everybody thought we were relatives.
Right.
We were cousins. His grandfather worked at Swift and Company, the meat company, the meat
manufacturing company. Right.
And we would drive from Jersey City over to Long Island where my cousins lived. And you'd have to go across one of the bridges, maybe the Brooklyn Bridge, or I forgot the name of the other bridge. And when you were stopped, the homeless would come up and try to wash your windows, right? And my father said, you know, some of these people who are doing this were, these homeless people, some were doctors, some were lawyers. And two things hit me from that. The Swift and Company experience was, one, I saw factories begin to close down. I said, I always want a job that has me so much flexibility that I'm guaranteed a job for the rest of my life,
right,
and that I can move, have the flexibility to move.
Yes.
And the other was, I don't necessarily want to be rich, but I damn sure don't want to be poor.
Right.
You know.
Right.
So the college piece, interesting. I went to high school. I'm going to an all predominantly, when I say predominantly white, I mean maybe it was a small high school, so maybe there are 500, 600, maybe 1,000 at the most, at the very most.
Okay.
And there are only about 3 or 4 of us blacks.
Wow.
Okay.
On one hand.
So, but it was a low income factory working population. A lot of Italians, some Polish, and some Irish.
Okay.
So they were really working class. Dudes were tough, right? But we were friendly. I remember one Italian guy said, if anybody in this neighborhood bothers you, just call me. I'll take care of them. So I was very friendly with them. My grades weren't that good in freshman and sophomore year.
Okay.
And I was just an okay runner, you know, in terms of track. By junior year, I said, damn, if you don't want to be poor and homeless, and you want to have the flexibility, I think maybe you should go to college.
Right. So
then my grades shot up, and I wound up graduating with second honors.
Excellent.
And then a friend of mine, Ernesto Tolentino, who's now a medical doctor, he was 2 years ahead of me, and they had a real good track team. They actually won distance medley in their junior year when I was a freshman at Penn Relays.
Oh, wow.
He said, well, you're going to come out for track. He didn't ask me, he told me, right? Freshman and sophomore year, I'm running distance. By junior year, I'm starting to run half miles, quarter miles, and winning. In my junior year, and that other group is gone, but my junior year, we won the indoors New Jersey State Mile Relay Championship. And in my senior year, I'm running real good times. That was when they had freshmen in college and varsity. So I'm in high school and I'm running 48-point quarters on relays.
Wow. Which are collegiate times.
Yeah, they were collegiate times back
Right.
then. I'm running high school. I'm running, and I won the indoor Catholic boys state championship quarter mile. Outdoors, I really should have won the 880-yard championship.
Right.
They said we were dipping at the tape.
Right.
That is the race. That is one of the things I regret most in my life, because I didn't try as hard as I should have in the last 100 yards. I had beaten him indoors. I should have won that. So it's always made me to say I'm never going to be slack again.
The track.
Right.
Till you hit the tape.
Yeah,
Run through the tape.
yeah, but I transferred that to the rest of my life.
Good.
I say,
Good.
I mean, the race is gonna be over like that.
Right.
And so whatever I do now is never give up. Everybody thought, oh, that was a great race, but I knew in my mind that shouldn't have been that great race. That should have been easy for me to win.
Exactly.
So
and as you're talking about track, it makes me think of Dick Gregory.
yeah,
It
he
makes me think of
he broke the record in the state for the mile run, and they never put it in the record books because he was black.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. And as a long distance runner, Mr. Dick Gregory, may rest in peace, Brother Dick Gregory, he continued to run a race of both publishing and scholarship and lecturing and awakening the consciousness of America, of the world.
And it's interesting because, he was a comedian that was sort of not chubby, but full and smoked until his conversion took place. Then he became a very health-oriented person.
With the Bohemian diet.
Yes. And gave up smoking and all. Yeah.
Yes.
Interesting.
Yes. Interesting.
Yes.
So I see
and
parallels.
Actually, he came to speak at the college, Chico State I was teaching at, and I picked him up from the airport. We came, I fed him. I don't think he spent the night there, but yeah, we had an opportunity to interact. He probably didn't ever remember because there were so many people. But yes, I did have the opportunity to meet with him.
Right. So I know it's, the viewers may want kind of this linear perspective, and that's challenging to do when there's so much to share. We go in cycles and circles in order to.
But the world's
have
not
the story
linear.
told.
The world is circular.
Yes.
Energy is circular. Atoms are circular. Everything, it's let the circle
Be unbroken. Yes.
So that's the way I taught. I tell students in the beginning of the semester, you have the course outline. You read everything. I'm not going to lecture just like that, but by the end of the semester, I will have covered everything.
Right.
Because it's interesting. Whole concept on child development. Descartes says, the European philosopher, French, I think, therefore I am. That means everything's cognitive. They also, that world, the European world philosophy says that children are born carte blanche, don't know anything. Think about the teaching methodology as you pour it in. Probably the ones when we went to school, the ones who memorized and gave back to the teacher was classified as the brightest.
Exactly.
From an Afrocentric or an African perspective, children are born with all the knowledge they need. It doesn't mean you have all the facts. It means that you have the ability to problem solve, to analyze, to figure things out.
Right.
It's a whole different methodology in terms of how you would not so much teach, but coach children. It's a whole different methodology that if we had time and maybe one of the other sessions, we could talk about how it impacts on children.
Right.
So
let me do a little Sankofa where we look backwards again to your collegiate years.
Yes.
You're running back and you are majoring in
sociology.
Spending your intellectual time engaged in what type of projects? Because I know I would think track took up a lot of time.
Well, yeah. And I ended up going to college coming out of high school, I did office. At that time, the colleges and universities had to go through the coach to get to you.
Okay.
It's a little different.
Right.
But I remember having offers from St. John's University, Manhattan, Georgetown University, a few. I had decided I was going to go into the seminary. During the middle of the summer, the hormones start jumping. And I said, I can't take a vow of chastity. That's crazy. And I began to question the Catholic Church.
Okay.
So by the time I called my coach from high school, it was the middle of the summer. A lot of scholarships have been given out. But he could have gotten me one. What happened was his mentee, the track coach from St. Peter's, had resigned. He was older dude. Bob Short, who was his mentee, Mr. Finn, who was my coach, made sure he got that position at St. Peter's. I don't think that Mr. Finn, who was good when I was a coach, pretty good, he didn't look for another college for me. He had me going to St. Peter's because his mentee was.
Right.
And
Right.
so to run the question back again.
So when you're in college and you are engaged in the level of intensity track, the amount of time it takes to run track, you decided on a major and you were engaged in certain intellectual projects.
I don't know if I was engaged in intellectual projects, to be truthful. You know, I was a semi-thug, man. I mean, I loved the streets, so growing up, in high school, I would sneak out the house at night.
Yeah. See, we didn't get this part earlier.
Yeah.
I had you in the jazz scene.
Right. I mean, I'm going to New York, yeah. I mean, so yeah, I'm over there on Lower East Side, but I'm going to Slugs. You know, I'm going to places, yeah, the music is there. But that was a whole nother scene.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I didn't spend a lot of time in Jersey City because I was smart enough to, for the parents of the women or girls I wanted to hit on, think I was a really nice guy.
Right.
You know, Jersey City in New York, it's called, Jersey City now is called New York Extended, right?
Okay.
But you could catch that time, it was called the Hudson Tubes, it's called Path now. And you could be in New York in 15, 20 minutes.
Right.
So I'm over in New York all the time. I'm up in Brooklyn, I'm up in Harlem, I'm all over, man. I rode the trains at night for entertainment. People say you were crazy. Here I'm weighing about 130 pounds, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it'll wacko a little bit. So, it like going to college, there was a piece of me because of the whole beginning of the civil rights movement. That was interesting. Like I said, reading Baldwin. You read Baldwin and then you question a lot of how you were raised when you read Baldwin, especially around religiosity and stuff. Excuse me, things like that. I think what was happening is that the piece of what happened in college, since we and two other brothers, Wellington Davis and Allen Hughes, we were the first blacks, as far as we know, to attend that college. That was established in 1876 in terms of having courses in a city that had a large black population, but no blacks had attended before us. Mm-hmm. And we only got there because how I explained on the track scholarship, even though we were academically qualified to be there.
Yes.
So,
just a real quick question. So when you were there, the school had been around for some 100 years.
Yes.
With no black student presence. I can imagine there were blacks that were helping to keep the place clean.
Yeah, in the cafeteria.
Yeah. Were there any black professors at that time?
Are you kidding? Come
I'm
on.
just asking the question.
The only professor of color I remember was Professor. She taught Spanish, and she was cool. She taught Spanish. Mm-hmm. That's the only person of color I remember.
And you didn't take a course with her?
Oh yes, I did.
Oh, you did?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
She was cool.
So you're in this school that's surrounded by basically whiteness, engaging their curriculum, and you find yourself with your buddies and doing the things you're doing, and you're deciding at some point to really deep into your academic work.
I keep laughing at that. And I guess what happened going over New York, Cooper Union, Malcolm's bodyguards, being exposed to a whole different way of thinking, etc.
Right.
The stimulation came for the academic piece, especially at the end of my sophomore year. I quit track. The coach and I just didn't get along. Actually, I took my shoes off and told him to run in them. Mm-hmm. And I got a half academic scholarship, a work study, which allowed me to have a lot more free time.
Yes.
And at that time, then, Baldwin's coming out, other black novelists are coming out, New Yorkers right there. And the excitement about learning about our culture is there.
It's in the air.
And the movement is starting there, right?
That's correct.
This whole civil rights movement. My senior year, Dr. Martin Luther King came to speak on campus. We had a group, a student group called Lafarge, That was an activist group that I was president of.
Excellent.
So now I'm into this movement piece, and there's some interest. There's interest in reading Hume as an example, Nietzsche, to understand this philosophical orientation. I don't know if that I could have intellectually talked about it like before, but I'm saying, wait a minute, these people are people who are saying this is the way the world is. That wasn't, in reading them, that wasn't all my experience. My world's a little different. My world's a little different. So now I'm beginning to do this juxtaposition, in terms of you saying blacks are lazy. Damn, everybody I knew worked hard. Okay? And now I'm having experiences with some of the college professors, because the other two brothers didn't hang out. I hung out. Okay? If there was a party, Aminifu was going to try to be there at the party, all right?
Okay.
Yeah, okay. I might have gone to white school, but I'm at the party. And track, we only had one track in Jersey City, so we all practiced together. So I knew everybody. I'm getting my picture in the paper. I'm sort of like a celebrity, right?
Because you're winning. You're running track and you're winning.
And I'm winning. And even from high school too. So I'm really an integral part of my life is an integral part of the black community. Going to those white schools was an extension, but that wasn't my main life. That wasn't my frame of reference. Okay,
yes.
For life. So the intellectual piece, I never thought of it like that, but I was stimulated in terms of learning about us, understanding this cultural piece. So the incident that happened, number of incidents, because I'm questioning this whole intellectual piece, this philosophical orientation. I have this ethics professor, Father, if it's German, Father Wasserman, if it's English, Father Wasserman. Ethics course, last semester. This was the most dictatorial person I ever met in my life. Here we are, we're all 21, 22.
Yes.
You couldn't chew gum in his class.
Right.
You couldn't lean over to the next person and say, oh, that's an interesting fact that he talked about. Couldn't do that. Couldn't be late for his class a minute.
Yes.
And you just name all the things you couldn't do. Class was like a dictatorship. I probably should have been more strategic in how I challenged him on that. But I had the highest grade in philosophy at that time, and the midterm grade, which we were doing percentages, so it had to be in the 90%. Look, I'm not going to school with dumb guys. This is a Jesuit institution.
Right.
These are guys that come in, some of them come from private, schools.
And they're being trained. Jesuit education is earmarked by this notion of critical thinking, of a worldview, being able to kind of bring about change in the world.
Now,
yes.
I'm not sure it always was.
Okay.
I'm not sure it always was.
That's the language.
They might have said that because they did have to say, develop the whole person.
Right.
So, and Wasserman was in charge of bringing lecturers into which is now university, but was a college then.
Okay.
So Martin Luther King comes in. I talked to one of the brothers I went to college with, and he said, you had something to do with that, Aminifu. I don't remember that necessarily that I did, but I remember sitting in there with Dr. Martin Luther King in that small group, with the college professors. And yes, and having that opportunity to interact with him. And Wasserman's in every picture, smiling. So I bump heads with him and I challenge him on this. I end up with a D in the course. There is no way mathematically possible I could have gotten a D in that course.
Considering you had a 90-ish percentile in the midterm.
Yes. No, and there's just no way possible. But I didn't know. My parents had never gone to college, my relatives, friends. I did not know how to challenge him on that. He never gave us our final exam back.
Right.
But what I learned from that is that I would never let my own personal views dictate how I dealt with a student. even if they differ. I would never downgrade them because I differ. I would only base them upon what the assignments were. So much to his unknowing, that experience helped me to be a more ethical and moral person. But what it did do is, it didn't allow me to get the achievement medal for philosophy at graduation.
Right.
You know,
Well,
it affected my GPA, but it didn't stop me from going to grad school.
interesting. You mentioned earlier that you were in a race. You had defeated the opponent, the co-racer, in an earlier race, and at some point you just kind of, you kicked back. Still, you could have won. You could have been more victorious.
Right. We're dipping at the tape, like I said.
And that was a life lesson.
Yes.
And
yes.
so now, moving forward, you run through the tape on everything. You use your time wisely. You're being more focused, if you will, on accomplishing your objectives.
Yeah. Because I also recognize the oppression of black people. And to myself, I made a commitment that whatever sacrifices it meant, I never wanted to be poor. I didn't want to be rich, but I didn't want to be poor.
Right.
That I would work in my way as the Creator put me here, as philosophically I begin to understand later on. Work on behalf of black folk. Whether that was activism, whether it was from a philosophical, intellectual approach.
Right.
And I came to the conclusion, the only thing that anyone can really do to me is kill me. I didn't want to die being tortured.
Right.
But that was the ultimate. So I can do what I choose to do. And remember, I wanted to go into the seminary. I wanted to develop myself spiritually. The European concept of their development in the Catholic Church didn't quite fit for me. So in this whole transitional piece, my parents were religious, not super religious, but they were religious. They were grounded in 10 Commandments. They didn't know about the 42, as Maulana Rankaranga wants to say, admonitions, but other people have called them 42, coming by day, by night, whatever. But they still believed in 10 Commandments. I remember every night my father got down on his knees and prayed. But my father was a bad somebody. There's stories of him knocking white dudes out. They don't mess with him.
Right.
So the spiritual piece is being developed, and I give kudos for those experiences, because some of the experiences, Father Yanatelli later became, while I was there, the president of St. Peter's. He started reaching out to the community, and he began to make a change.
They're in Jersey City, where the school was.
Yes.
And when did you travel? When did you mentally travel abroad? When you were exposed to some European scholars, you mentioned their names, Hume and Nietzsche and others. When did you, and you had read Baldwin, when did you, and you had worked with Malcolm's bodyguards, when did you travel mentally? When did you travel physically?
Well, two things began to occur. Not only the civil rights movement, but African countries and the Caribbean countries are gaining their independence around this time also, when we start talking about, the middle, late 60s, early 70s. Vietnam War is going on. They had ROTC at St. Peter's College. I'm saying to myself, they're going to draft your little yellow butt when you get out, as soon as you graduate, to go to Vietnam. You know how you are. You will not function well going into the military as an enlisted person. But you're going to go to jail or the brig, whatever you want to call it. So I did 4 years of ROTC, which was nice because the last 2 years, you have a commitment to do service.
You're running track and you're in ROTC.
Well, the first 2 years, ROTC was like the gym, was physical exercise. That was a course.
Yes.
I quit track after my sophomore year.
Right.
So now the last 2 years, which are the advanced ROTC, in which you have a commitment for the service, and you get paid. But you go in as a second lieutenant.
Right.
I did at that time begin to have a better understanding about what rank meant, what class meant. I knew it was going to be hard for them to really punish me, in quotes, as a second lieutenant. So I graduated, went to
Basic training?
The basic training, yes. After I graduated, I went into the military. I graduated in 1966 from college.
What was your degree in?
My degree is in sociology.
Okay.
So I went, and then I was commissioned as a first lieutenant. My MOS was military police. 2 years was not the greatest experience, but I knew, and I wanted to go airborne ranger, but I didn't have that commitment to the U.S. at that time. I told my parents, if I get sent to Vietnam, I'm going to Canada. My parents were a little upset. I said, well, would you rather have what they would classify me as a deserter or a dead son? They began to understand. Fortunate enough, I was sent to Germany. I still had experiences there. I'll tell you one experience I had. And this was not just because of my personality, which was part of it, standing up for things, but also it was because of the racism in the military, especially at that time. You didn't have a lot of black officers, and you didn't have black field grade officers. The highest you probably as a black person was going to be a major. That was it. You weren't going to make no lieutenant colonel or colonel.
Right.
It was rare. I mean, when I say rare, rare. So, I get assigned, I'll cut through somebody. I wind up being the second person in charge of the military jail. My captain, who was in charge, Captain Dusich, he was okay. He was a good dude. He is going on leave. He gives me paperwork to take, I think, to Munich, to the headquarters, right? Which meant that I had to be basically going for the day. The person in charge of what we would call jail now was, I think he was first sergeant, either first sergeant or sergeant major. Top NCO that you could be, right? They also, at night, you had somebody that was in charge of the whole compound.
Right.
They used him. Now at night, you're in charge of the whole compound. So I'm leaving, and he's going to be just in charge of the jail. All right, prison. I thought it was fine. Because you used him to be in charge of the whole
situation.
Yeah. Well, I think what was happening, do you remember the Barrigan brothers?
No.
The Barrigan brothers, one was a priest, one was a lay person. They were against the Vietnam War. They went in and broke into some of the recruiting officers and poured blood on some of the paperwork.
Oh, wow.
Well, the Barrigan brother, who was a lay person, his daughter was in, she wasn't in the military. Jeez, all this, the nomenclature I'm forgetting.
Women's auxiliary?
Yeah, it was something like that, but it
something?
had another, specific.
Okay.
It seemed like it began with S. S. But anyway, she and I had some, she was Caucasian, had some of the same political ideology. We were not lovers, we were friends.
Right.
Occasionally we went out, dinner. I remember one time I went to pick her up at the offices, where all the officers stayed. I'm forgetting all this terminology. I knock on the door to get in. Hey, like, officers, what do you want? I want you to open the door. That's what I want. You know I'm an officer. So I go pick her up. We get stopped on the way. These dudes must have, they must have commandeered a Jeep because they act like they military police, but they weren't. I know they weren't.
Right, because you were military.
Yeah, and I would have known them. But we didn't have an incident with them. But I think some of this was getting back to the colonel who was in charge of the whole compound. I did have an incident before that. This captain comes and he wants to see one of the guys who was locked up. he comes and starts giving me orders. I said, you're a captain, I'm a lieutenant. But I'm in charge of this unit, the jail. You don't have that authority here. So you can't give me an order in relationship to what I'm supposed to do here. You can't. I'm sure he went and told Colonel.
I was going to ask you, did he take it well?
Hell no. And you know he's Caucasian. You know, we talking about 1967, 68. Mm-hmm. And then another incident which occurred because we didn't have cafeteria services, mess hall services. They had to march over to the mess hall. So this one brother, who was always cool, you know, we always get in Article 15. We always gonna wind up in.
For us non-military, Article 15 means?
Article 15 means they cite you for something, depending upon what it is. You might do a month or so, you know, and all, you know, or they getting us for some other stuff, you know, because they came after us, you know, I mean, literally. So we march over to the mess hall. Brother gets his tray. He asks the guy who was serving the food, he says, is this hot? White guy. Puts his finger on his tongue. I see this now. Right. Finger on his tongue. Sticks his finger in the brother's food. He said, I think so. The brother flipped the tray on him. I was saying to myself, you should have snatched him from behind the counter. Mm-hmm. Right? So the man told his captain. Mm-hmm. Captain comes over and says, I want you to press charges against the inmate. I said, as soon as you press charges against your man. That's when I pressed charges against him. Of course he didn't want to press charges. So all this, I'm sure, got back to the colonel. So I think Manheim, I can't remember where I'm going, but it's a day I'm going to be going to bring these reports. The colonel, who had never ever visited the jail, I'm trying to remember what they call the jail in the military. The brig. Yeah, brig, seemed like. But anyway, who had never visited, decides he's going to visit. Now, you know he knows I'm away, right? You know that. He's going to come over and then try to get me on dereliction of duty, saying I left my post. Wow. I get orders to go from my captain. Right. I'm leaving this high-ranking sergeant, who you use for the whole compound there. Mm-hmm. Now, I ain't done. Mm-hmm. I write home. My parents and the time the lady I was dating, they call up their congressperson. There's a congressional investigation on this. Wow. That colonel's picture gets in the paper. I said, you can't put my picture in the paper, but I'll give you a statement. That colonel never made general. The only thing they could do to me, they moved me. But before I left, we had an IG, it's called Inspector General's inspection. Yes. The highest ranking they had ever gotten. On
your watch. So you are now experiencing racism.
Overt racism.
And you are responding through the use of the structures, the power of, in this case, government, having the Congress member investigate, and media.
Because if you have a congressional investigation, you can forget getting promoted.
Yes. Yes.
And I won.
Right. Yeah. Right. So you are maturing as a professional in a very, shall we say, an even more strict environment than your ethics teacher's environment in that classroom, considering you're in the military, it's the MP, it's this chain of command, and you are navigating this troublesome space effectively, arguably, right? Mm-hmm. And
because I understand systems.
You understand.
That's why I went into the military as an officer. I know you're not going to court-martial me unless I do something drastic. You might try to, you know, like he couldn't, the colonel, he was out on it.
Right, right.
I know enough about systems to know. And one of the things I knew, especially from my father, I will never let anything happen to you on the outside that I can prevent.
Right.
So I know if I write to my daddy,
Mm-hmm.
and he was astute, he knew systems also,
Yes.
that he's going to find out what he can do to make
Excellent.
sure that his son is
Excellent.
okay.
Excellent. So when did you make a decision to transition out of the military back into the
The day I went
non-military
into the
world?
military. Before. I knew I wasn't.
You had your numbers.
Oh yeah, I knew that it was a
They-
2-year commitment, but it
okay.
was a 2-year commitment because I didn't want to go in as an enlisted person, and I knew I would be drafted. This is Vietnam War,
Right.
all right.
Right.
So I knew once I did time, you have I think a 6-year commitment, but the reserves, there were so many people getting out of the military then, I didn't even have to do active reserves.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I began to know my personality. I began to know that I'm not going to let people run over me. I began to understand oppression.
Right.
Remember, I'm hanging out with Malcolm's bodyguards.
that's
I'm hanging
right.
out with people who are in the
This is
civil
even
rights
in
movement.
high school before going to college.
Yeah.
So what was, you hear about black men and women, but black men in the military during this time. You hear about blacks in the Vietnam War, Bloods. You hear about blacks kind of coming back out of the military.
Mm-hmm.
What was it like for you, a returning, person who grew up in New Jersey, returning out of the military back into society? What was that experience like?
Let me think about that one for a minute. I got out. I got married in my second year in the military. So, to a sister that we grew up with. So
Did you all live on the base? Did you live off the base?
we lived actually off the base.
Okay.
We lived off the base. I was stationed in a place, when they moved me from, what we call the brink, they moved me to a place, so this is funny, called Kershaw and Landon, in which I'm responsible for all these silos that have missile heads in them. So you're going to move me from there to be responsible for nuclear heads, right?
Arms.
And it was funny because it was almost impossible for the military to get into those silos, but the Germans workers were in and out every day.
Interesting.
Right? So, of course, that history follows me, as in my new assignment. And the first sergeant that was there, he looked at me with a joint aside. My clerk, now I'm responsible for the second in command, actually, for the base. The clerk was a graduate of Harvard. He was an enlisted man. So we're getting ready to have another IG inspection. He said, between you and me and Dr. Harvey, we got this stuff wrapped up.
Mm-hmm.
Bright guy, right? We come out Harvard, man, we get along. They had the highest grade they had ever received in the IG inspection we got.
Hmm.
That first sergeant came to me and said, I have to apologize to you. I thought you were slack because of the way it was written up.
Mm-hmm.
He said, I'm sorry. I said, I'm fine. I'm saying to myself, my life doesn't contingent upon what you think anyway.
Right. Right.
The captain who was there at that time said, you'll probably never get promoted. I said, I'm not looking to get promoted. I'm looking to get out of here.
Okay.
But I learned that whatever your position is, you do it well.
Yes.
You don't give people the opening to get you.
Right.
All right?
Right.
So my parents, we traveled. At that time, the green book they talk about?
Just gonna ask you about the green book.
We
You
had
mentioned
one.
travel. Yes.
We had one, and you had to
Okay.
look it up to see where you could eat, what hotels
Interesting.
stay in. So we stayed a lot of times with relatives. And my mother said, when you stay with somebody, you leave wherever you were better than what it was when you came.
Interesting.
So this whole piece about doing well, knowing systems, knowing how to do what you do, came from them.
Interesting.
It was like, oh, I know how to do this. I know what this system is like. I know how to make it better than it ever was. You ain't dealing with somebody just because your view and your perception of me in a certain way. That's not who I am.
So just want to go back a little bit. You had been exposed to the Green Book. You traveled with your family.
Yes.
Domestically.
Yeah, we went, from Jersey, California to Louisiana. Yes.
Very nice.
My father liked to expose us.
Excellent.
So did my mother. Yes.
Excellent. And then you joined the military. You're stationed in Germany.
Yes.
And any other places before coming back stateside?
No, I actually requested to get discharged in Europe.
Yes.
And I got discharged, and my wife and I traveled around a little bit in Europe.
Excellent.
She went home before I did, but about 2 or 3 weeks later,
Did you all make it to Paris? Did you make it to France? Some of the places you went to?
made to Paris. I don't think we went to London. We did go to Paris. We went to the coast of France. Did we go to Portugal? We went to Spain, and that was when I first knew about the Black Madonna. Okay, because we went up there and we saw her. So we traveled to Spain. I think we went to the Netherlands, all around Germany, because we lived on the economy. And there was this young little German girl. My wife actually taught nursery school on base.
Yes.
Right? And befriended this little German girl who was the daughter of the people we rented from. And she traveled with us a little bit. So the world is... And actually, I think we went to Gibraltar. We crossed Gibraltar. I think we went in
Morocco, maybe?
I think we went to maybe Morocco, because I remember being in this desert. Yeah, so the world, literally the world's opening up. So I didn't speak another language. I could read French a little bit then. I could read French. Speak a little French, so we were able to maneuver around.
Did you encounter many or other people of color, whether they were jazz musicians or expatriates abroad while you and your wife were traveling?
No, not many.
Okay,
not many, to be truthful, not many.
Okay. Came back to the States then and decided to continue growing professionally yet in another direction.
When you say that, it's like, I don't know if I made those kind of decisions, really. They just sort of fell in place. I come back to the States, and I get this job in Newark, and the state had just developed services for families and youth. So I'm dealing with adoptions, I'm dealing with foster care, I'm dealing with juvenile services. They're all on my caseload. And so the brother who I say is my older brother, Bill Merritt, was at this agency, and he was a supervisor. William Merritt was the Black United Fund.
Yeah,
okay, that's
Chicago.
No, in Newark.
Newark,
Yeah. So Bill and I became friendly. What actually happened? 2 incidents. One, there was this brother who lived around the corner from me, he and his wife, in Jersey City.
Yes.
Who wanted to adopt. Okay. And both of them had jobs somewhere in New York. Mm-hmm. Decent jobs.
Right.
They get turned down by this white supervisor who went to St. Peter's High School for sure, maybe college. I go back to Bill Merritt and say, I know these people are qualified. He takes over the case, and of course the adoption. I'm saying, now I'm beginning to see all this stuff take place. We're staying in this attic apartment. He had to walk through the owner's house and go upstairs. I'm going to give you a little piece of that. I said I was semi-thug. I'm hanging out on the weekends, right? I'm having lots of fun. I just put it like that. I know about all sorts of life like that. Everything's happening. Drugs in there, I came home one day and I said to my wife, I'm leaving. I know your family's here. You're welcome to stay. Peaches, we had a little dog, I taught him to do tricks. You can have what I can have. I had a Mustang convertible. I said, in 2 weeks, I'm out of here because I will do nothing with my life. I know I'll do nothing with my life. And you should see from my behavior, I do nothing with my life. So you're welcome to come, but if you stay, I understand. 2 weeks later, we were in that Mustang convertible with that dog on our way to California. I asked my aunt and uncle, could I stay with them? I had been out there before.
Right.
And my aunt and
You
uncle
traveled
said,
earlier.
surely.
Mm-hmm.
So I went out there, and she had been in high school. She took all those secretarial courses, so
Yes.
she got a job easily.
Excellent.
I got it. My uncle, who was in charge of all the maintenance services for the whole county of Los Angeles,
Mm-hmm.
said you can go into probation and come in right away as like an intern. I'm dealing with youth probation. Not youth who are on the outside, youth who are housed.
In LA in the 70s.
Yes, yes.
Wow.
Probably late 69, early 70.
Gangs on the rise.
Gangs, especially Hispanic gangs, always.
Mm-hmm.
And so now they're in, these cottages they're overcrowded. They're sleeping on the floor. You have white guys, Caucasians, who are working there, who had a history major, for example, English major. Ain't no jobs for them. Now they're bachelors.
Right.
Who at some point are thinking about maybe going to law school and all. Who don't know how to work with these children. I remember one time, we're all like, after they would eat, they would go into this little area, like garden area. I asked the two other guys if they would go inside. I'd rather be out there with them by myself. And there was a little fight that jumped off. I knew who the leaders were. I told one leader, you grab this guy, you grab this guy, right? Because they're the leaders, okay? But I said, I need to get out of here. So I took the test for parole agent. Came out number 1 in Southern California. They couldn't hire anybody until I decided where. So I took that job. And at the same time, then I said, when I was looking for jobs, I went to Catholic Charities. This old Irish dude who was evident liked alcohol said to me, if you want to stay in this field, you either need to get a PhD in psychology or an MSW in social work. So Ebony magazine at that time, every year would put out a list of fellowships that were focused on people, blacks.
Interesting.
And there was one, Martin Luther King Jr. Fellowship through the Woodrow Wilson Foundation, for ex-military who wanted to go to grad school. I applied, I got it.
Congratulations. Yeah.
Thank you. And so that's how I ended up University of Southern California.
Okay, so you're at Southern Cal. You've been married. You live in Jersey. You travel abroad. You had these wonderful experiences. What was USC like? That wasn't the time when
It was O.J. Simpson.
O.J. Simpson. Owenthal Simpson was there, was he?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I think he was there 1 year or he had just left.
Okay, interesting.
So there's a significant black population.
Yes.
It was so significant that the football games had their own black cheerleaders. At the football games.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still young. I'm not quite 30.
Mm-hmm.
And I always looked younger than what I was.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm in grad school. There's a brother by the name of Malchus Neely, one of my best friends now, who went to Whittier College, averaged 29 points for 2 years.
Wow.
Excellent basketball player. We got along real well. We hung out, right? But now when you talk about the whole intellectual piece, that's when I got turned on, really. Doheny Library closed on Fridays at 6 o'clock. I stayed in there on Fridays until 6 o'clock. This is like, I'm reading all this stuff. This is fascinating to me. That's when I really open up in terms of this whole intellectual stuff,
Yes.
right?
Did you have a guide? Was there a professor? Was there someone who
Barbara
directed
Solomon.
you towards certain readings?
Ruth Brown. No, they didn't guide me to certain readings, but they were the first time that I had, the third time I had black professors. And you had a significant number of Hispanics in the program,
Right.
blacks, Caucasian. And we all had these student organizations. They're showing this film in Georgia from 1940s. That's outdated. So we elected out of those three organizations a white boy who was, hippie type, to be the president of the student union, student group.
Right.
Because we're going to put you on Front Street.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to be the one on Front Street.
Mm-hmm.
Before they come after us, they're going to have to get you.
Right.
It was all strategic. So then we said we would like to have a discussion of that film to the dean. We would like to open it up to the community. I said, yeah. Well, one of the students, Sandra Lane, her daddy was a judge. So those are the kind of people we invite. You thought we were going to just invite any, ordinary folk. Before that film was half over, the dean stood up and said, unless you want to see the rest of it, we're already taking it out, of the curriculum. Barbara Solomon wrote the classic work on empowerment. Whole concept of empowerment comes out of her classic work.
Interesting.
And she was one of my professors.
Yes.
Barbara would always write a letter of recommendation for me. She was really known in the field. I don't think so much that she told me what books to read, but she didn't have to tell me what books to read then. I'm like, I'm out there. Another brother and myself put on the first African Liberation Day in LA.
ALD.
And I'm also working for this community mental health center. I'm starting to try to organize the health workers. Al Cannon, psychiatrist, who was responsible for bringing in all the mental health money, because the mental health money is new then from the feds, into LA, didn't like the idea that I was organizing. Now, Central City Community Mental Health Center, where I work, had a component to it that was a halfway house for guys getting out of prison.
Right.
I got along with all of them. That's the little street in me, right?
Mm-hmm.
I ain't no big guy, but I'm weighing about 165. I'm taking some martial arts at that time. I still believe, no matter how big you are, everybody bleeds.
Mm-hmm.
By that time, I'm also separated from my wife. Al Cannon says to them, tells me, not directly, but through some people, you better stop organizing. He tells the guys from the halfway house, if he doesn't stop organizing, I want y'all to teach him a lesson. They come back and tell me, Aminifu, stop. Because, we don't want to go back. We don't want to hurt you. I said, look, y'all come this way, we got a war. I got guys that grew up from Jersey City. They just as crazy as you. They just ain't never got busted. I said, I hope we don't have it, but, if we got to, we got to. And it got big, I have people calling, they trying to set up a meeting between myself and Al Cannon. So in the whole black mental health field, it's out there. It's large. Barbara Solomon calls me up, says, I'm Richie then. I'm Richie Harvey all up until this time. I know you've always thought about teaching. This is crazy stuff out here. You don't need to be in this. There's an opening at Chico State. Why don't you apply for it? I'd like for you to apply. I'm like, I'm not afraid of Al Cannon. She said, that's not the issue. Basically, you have too much to offer for this stuff.
Right.
To get it,
Interesting.
I said, okay. So at the time in the mental health center, this is the first time I'm having what we call villages for the youth.
Mm-hmm.
I started with one little group now, and it's similar to rites of passage, but it's still from a Eurocentric perspective, where we have young people who have different offices. We're having our programs in which we're teaching skills in it. We wind up having about 100 youth, and we had each group had a male and female mental health worker. So we have about 6 of us total.
Right.
So now, some of my innovation is being recognized. I'm still going to these marches. I had a dog called Lucky.
Mm-hmm.
Lucky was half German Shepherd, half lab. Stood about this high. We went to this march in Whittier, right? Because, yeah. Anyway, one of the dudes says, "Man, I just saw the cops jump out the car and puncture all our tires." And little Pinto. I stopped the Whittier police. He said, "Oh, that can't be. That's undercover from LA PD." Went to LAPD, got back and went to LAPD. They said there's no such license plates. You know, it's like, how far do we want to push this? But Lucky, you could ride with Lucky. Everybody would ride with Lucky. They put their feet right on top of him. You know, he's in the lowest component in the bottom, in the back of the car. So I'm involved with the Angela Davis Defense Committee at this time. It's a Sunday and I go to open up the office. I didn't have to have Lucky on a leash. And just come here, Lucky. Talk to him just like you and I talk. Get out the car. Now, this is in Southeast LA. I ain't never seen no cop walking in Southeast LA. Come on. See this cop coming down the street. Lucky goes off. Lucky ain't a small dog now. But I can control him. Come here, Lucky. Come here. Just stay here. Just stay here. I don't remember what happened with the cop. He just walked in. I went to open up the office. But Lucky was really my protector, and I didn't even know it at that time. I didn't, you know. So I'm involved with a lot of things at that particular, a lot of movement things at that particular time in LA. I did go up to Chico. I got the position, and it was good for me because Chico's at the tip of the San Joaquin Valley. San Joaquin Valley is the farming, valley.
Okay.
Bidwell Park is the longest park in the United States. They had natural swimming pools.
Oh, beautiful.
And during the summer, a lot of teams, softball teams, and I'm playing a little basketball. I was always a good defensive player. I'm teaching myself how to be an offensive player. We have some teams I'm playing on. It was a good place for me at that particular time.
Mm-hmm.
Just a good place for me to be, to cool out and to begin to get in myself.
So from abroad to Southern Cal to now, going through this process with the mental health funding and the potential clash.
And what's
to,
interesting with Al
campus, yes.
One of my best friends in LA, who's an anesthesiologist,
Okay.
it ended up being his uncle.
Isn't that something?
And Al had died by that time. He even said, Al crazy. Brilliant. Crazy, yeah. So
you're at Chico State.
uh-huh.
You are approaching teaching.
Yeah, I'm teaching at the time.
And
Undergrad,
your
yeah.
students are, for the most part, from the West Coast, or are they from all over?
No, most of the students from the West Coast. The black students most of them are from Oakland,
Okay.
some from San Francisco, Oakland had a
Fran.
lot.
Right.
And then we had African students
Interesting.
who came up to Chico. That's interesting. When I was at St. Peter's and we would have African students come, I'd invite them to my house. And after I actually left, my parents continued to house
Very
African
nice.
students who were
Very
there.
nice.
My parents become rather progressive in many ways. So at Chico, I was cooling out.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Nice lifestyle. You probably wearing your Birkenstocks, going swimming in the natural pools.
Yeah, and I'm wearing dashikis every day.
Dashikis.
I'm
Okay,
wearing
very nice.
dashikis
Culturally
every day,
expressive.
yes.
Right.
Because I'm going down to San Francisco. Because remember that community mental health center Richard King,
Yes.
psychiatrist.
Yes.
Richard and I
I've
become
seen
good
him.
friends. I would
Wow.
go down to San Francisco, stay at his house. He'd give me the keys to one of the car.
Right.
All right.
Very nice.
Also, while I'm at Chico State, social work students had to do internships.
Okay.
So I'm trying to find internships for them in the Bay Area.
Right.
And that's where I first met Wade Nobles. Wade's working at Community Mental Health Center.
Wow.
And that's where I met Wade. And we
He's a
established
psychologist,
profession.
yes?
Yeah, he's
Yes.
a community psychologist.
Okay.
That we begin to establish some kind of relationship with each other.
Excellent. So you had Malcolm X's bodyguards as colleagues in high school. You've been on the
Well, they didn't attend the same.
No,
this
not
was in college, but-
I'm with you. I'm just
Yeah.
I'm going back to come forward. So you've had almost like layers. They've been intermingled, but layers of influences. The influences within the movement community included, but are not limited to, Malcolm X's bodyguards, some of them.
Right.
You've been on the Angela Davis Defense Committee.
Right.
You are now meeting with Wade Nobles and Richard King, and these are the, if you will, scholars within
Becoming-
movement. They're becoming
Wade
scholars
is
at
just
the time.
becoming a scholar at
Yes.
that time at the Community Mental Health Center. So he's in his developmental years too, professionally.
Right.
Yes.
Right. And the nature of your relationship or the growth of your relationship is through your peers influencing your decisions of how to approach
Yeah.
the mental and
Because remember, in
sociological
LA at this
issues.
time, that's when this Afrocentric movement is beginning to take place. And so
A lot of Karanga's involved.
Karenga's involved, and at that time, Karenga and us, with us, and the Black Panther Party, that's when they had the shootout on UCLA's campus.
Yes.
And who's now one of my good friends, Dr. Douglas Glasgow, he and a few other black professors were there at the day of the shootout.
Wow.
And see, they're working to bring students on campus, black
Yes.
students on campus. And he's also, and with the few black professors who are there, had were instrumental in bringing Angela Davis on campus to teach.
Mhm.
And I'm working at the Community Mental Health Center, the Symbionese Liberation Army,
Mhm. I've heard of it.
when they kidnapped that white girl,
Patty Hearst.
Patty Hearst. We're in the office on Broadway, and we hear all the sirens going down, and that's when they thought that she was in that particular house, and they just about destroyed that house but she wasn't in there.
Mhm.
So, because I had been a parole agent before I went to grad school. And I acted as a parole agent more as a social worker, Interesting, but I realized how much power one had when you showed a badge. So one night, before I went to grad school, might have been in grad school because I worked the summer between my first and second year in grad school. I was still a parole agent.
Okay.
I'm coming home. Cops pull up and block me from walking. They pull up in a driveway. Each one gets out, and each put 357 magnums on each side of my head. I always carried my badge next to my driver's license. I was probably a little high, but I sobered up real quick. I said, "Can I show you my ID?" "All right, let's see your ID." So I flip it open, they see the badge. They put the guns away. I think that's the only thing that saved me that night.
Mhm.
I was actually too shaken to get the names, right?
Mhm.
But I asked, why'd you stop me? Oh, somebody fitting your description, just committed a robbery. I'm not going to argue with you because ain't nobody else out there this late at night and you all have guns. So I had incidents like that happen. I actually had a fight with a cop at this festival. Walking, the cars are parked perpendicular, so I'm going back to my car to get something. He sees me, I'm halfway through there. He decides he's going to walk. And remember, by this time, I'm working out, man. I'm in good shape, and I'm taking martial arts.
Mm-hmm.
So I move a little bit, he don't move. We bump shoulders. I bumped his, like, ah! So he went up against the car, fell up against the car. Ain't nobody see this. I said, if he moves towards his gun, I'm taking his gun and I'm shooting him. Because they're going to kill you, Aminifu.
Mm-hmm.
Right? By that time, it's interesting. He didn't go towards his gun. He just turned around and left. I begin to understand the spiritual side. Creator wants you to do something other than being in this conflict all the time. Right? So at that community mental health center, I said, you got two. Dream came to me. He said, you got two choices. You continue to move in this activism like you are, but you're really physical in it. Or you can move intellectually. If you keep the physical aspect, you're going to die young. Because I'm not even 30 yet. If you move to more an intellectual perspective, still being active, you'll live a long life. And I have lived a long life.
Have you found that some of your peers had parallel circumstances?
Don't know.
Or had to come to a choice as such?
Don't
a
know.
crossroads?
Don't know.
Hadn't had that conversation?
Haven't had that. And that would be an interesting conversation.
Right, absolutely.
But I haven't had it. Most of them, from what I know, have probably had racial experiences, but I don't know if they've had that. I realized I was sort of a physical person back then.
Right.
And I didn't realize that I grew up with dudes who were always 2 years older than me. All of them were probably 6 feet, weighing 200 pounds. So they had a big influence on me. But I didn't start fights. I didn't start them.
Right.
But there was a physicality about me back then.
Did you find that when you were in the academy and you're addressing your work, that you had an ear to the ground of what was going on in terms of activism and those who, were still fully engaged in the physical movement area?
I'm not sure what you mean by that.
So you said that you made a choice. If you're staying in the movement because you were a physical guy in the movement.
Well, but I'm in the movement, but I'm not with an organization.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Other than Angela Davis Defense Committee.
Got it.
And by that time, she's getting out,
Yes. So I'm asking a question, it's almost a period piece.
Uh-huh.
And that is, when you were at Chico State and you are now focused on academia, were you keeping an ear to the ground? You said at some point you're in the movement.
Yeah, I'm still going to San Francisco. I'm still, yes. Because like I said.
So you're very much aware of the
Oh, yeah.
movement is literally outside the door
Yeah.
of the university, if not spilling over into the university.
Well, Chico State was like 2.5, 3 hours from San Francisco.
Okay.
South.
Okay.
So, but because I knew people in San Francisco, because I spent my summers in Oakland, California. So even when I was at Chico, I would come and I would bring things down to the Black Panther Party, and like to their breakfast program. And when I'm spending summers, by now I'm in the National Association of Black Social Workers.
Okay.
I'm going to their conferences. I'm beginning to present.
Yes.
People used to come just for me to present. Because now I'm developing this whole concept from a social work perspective on Afrocentric theory and practice. I'm the one that brought it to social work.
Yes.
And during the summers, I would also sell African artifacts.
Interesting.
All right. So I
Interesting.
set up a booth at the
Right.
conferences and sell.
Right.
Probably when the first people get my ear pierced, I remember they used to ask me, well, what are some of the gangs in LA? Wow, how could you forget?
Right. Well, I just know the Bloods and Crips.
The Bloods and the Crips. They used to ask me if I was in them, But early when I worked at the Community Mental Health Center, we did some work with the Crips,
Yes.
who initially established.
Right.
And we had worked out with the police to have a meeting to try to bring some calm.
Yes.
and the police agreed to some of what we had, what we said, what we wanted in place, we come to have this meeting and they denied we ever met.
Wow. Like you didn't record it, it wasn't.
Yeah, it was Parkhead. The police in LA were vicious.
Receipts, I hear it.
Yeah,
I hear it.
So, yeah, my year is pretty much to the ground because I'm spending summers. I'm going down to Oakland. I established a real relationship with a friend. I'm staying with him and his family during the summers.
Yes.
I'm selling the artifacts. I mean, we hanging. I'm going, because I've been in the Angela Davis Defense Committee, I'm going to some events and parties that Angela's at.
Mm-hmm.
Angela,
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Very much so.
I ain't never moved away from it.
No, I hear it.
And then you have students coming from Oakland.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's how I got my name Aminifu. I'm working with them unofficially.
Okay.
One night they call me up and say, come down to the Black House. I said, okay, come down to the Black House. And they have a naming ceremony. They said, we have a naming ceremony for you tonight. I said, okay. They gave me the name of Aminifu because it meant faithful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I worked with students. I wasn't that much older than the students.
Mm-hmm.
I think I turned 30 when I first started teaching at Chico State. I think actually I turned 30 on the continent.
Right.
That's time I went to, where'd I go? Probably Ghana.
Ghana.
Yeah, and so the first time I was teaching class, I went and sat down in the classroom, and the students are saying, I heard we have a new black professor. I said, oh yeah? They said, yeah, we want to see what he's like. And then I got up and started teaching class. But at that time, students and faculty were closer.
Closer.
Yeah, we were
Okay.
closer. So my experience at Chico was interesting experience. It was a good experience for me.
Now, when you went to Africa, was it with a group? Was it with
Well,
a family?
Interesting. Chico State, Kenya. It was Kenya. They had, once you have one African student come to university, all the rest of them come, right? So they, during the summer, had a study abroad in Kenya. And so I went on that, but I wasn't in that. Once I got over to Africa, I went on my own.
Okay.
I went on my own.
Okay.
One of the students had hooked me up with his family. And on the continent, I don't know if it's still so, the men would hold hands like this.
Yes, they do.
Right? Okay.
We
Now
walking
you know
down
over
Ghana,
here.
we walking down Ghana just like
Yeah.
this, me and my buddy,
Right.
holding hands. Exactly.
Now, at that time in the States, and you hold the hands, they had a whole nother
Right,
perspective.
exactly.
And so I had this denim camera bag, and I'm walking down the street holding hands. I'm perspiring because it's so different from me. That was.
Interesting.
I also visited at that time Tanzania.
Tanzania.
Yeah. That was also a very enlightening experience for me. At that time, I have pictures actually in my office of when Jomo Kenyatta was coming to what was, I guess at that time maybe called the Jomo Kenyatta Center, where he was announcing that Kiswahili would be the official language of Kenya.
Interesting. Gino Lako Ninani.
Oh yeah, Aminifu.
Yes.
Aminifu.
Yes. So you are in Kenya, you are in Tanzania, Jomo Kenyatta is, moving the culture forward, and you're at Chico State, you're presenting at conferences, you are having a broadening experience of your worldview. How did you begin to develop, as you indicated, the African-centered perspective that you brought?
Well, at this
to
particular
sociology?
time, Wade, your favorite person, who's your favorite psychologist?
Mine is Naeem Akbar.
Naeem, right?
Naeem
So it's
Akbar.
Wade,
Yes.
Naeem, and they're all coming out of really this group that's in LA at Martin Luther King Hospital.
I want to throw a name in there. I want to throw a couple's name in there.
Okay.
Nathan and Julia Hare.
Yeah, that had the publication
Yes.
relationships.
They had one. I didn't know about that one.
Yes.
I knew about this one. I think it's called the Black Think Tank. an
They had a black
academic
bank
journal
Yes,
that
yes.
still continues to this
Yes,
day.
yes.
So they had a publication
And
called
they're in San
Relationships.
Francisco.
They're in
Yes,
San Fran.
they're in San
Okay.
Francisco.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So there's a group meeting that these ideas are bubbling up. You all are
Yeah.
basically an intellectual collective.
And it's interesting, when I'm at that community mental health center,
Mm-hmm.
I'm using some of their work. Because we started a male-female relationship workshop.
Interesting.
So I'm doing a lot of innovative things. It was
Right.
probably one of the first ones that ever got established.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the first time we did it at the sister's house. We in grad school together. It got so crowded, man. It was people out there.
Needed a bigger space.
And we really didn't know what we were doing.
Right.
But we were doing something.
Right.
We were starting a
People were
conversation.
responding to.
Yes, and we
People
were
were
starting a
responding.
conversation where we knew we had to begin to talk to each other.
Mm-hmm.
So I am beginning to be known as this young, bright person.
Excellent.
I don't know if I looked at myself like that but that's what I'm, beginning to be known as.
Were your elders still around? Was Professor Solomon?
But oh yeah, she's still alive today.
Were there other elder scholars that were helping, feeding or sharing opportunities for you to present, or was it more you and
Well,
your
most of my
peers
presentation was
were-
at the National Association of Black Social Workers.
Okay.
What I looked at, I saw the black psychologists look at this whole piece from a theoretical perspective.
Yes.
Okay, Asa Hilliard. So I know all of them.
A B side. Yes.
I know all of
Yes,
them.
yes,
I'm
yes.
doing something with them.
Right.
I said, but what do social workers do? Oh, we implement. We do, we on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
We develop the program. So I'm beginning now to take the theoretical orientations and trying to put them
Interesting.
apply them.
Right.
Now Wade did some of that,
Okay.
but he's a community
Within
psychologist.
within the social work space.
No, Wade did it from the,
Okay.
but I'm doing it from the social work.
I understand. So you're a bridge now between the black psychologists developing these ways of addressing the black community's issues from the black
I
perspective.
know I left. You put all these terms, and I'm saying it was probably unofficial,
Right.
But I am, yes, because I knew both of them.
Exactly. And you're in both communities, basically.
Yes, yes.
And you're sharing ideas.
So a lot of people thought I was a psychologist.
You're sharing ideas across spaces. Here's what I mean. You said it. You are talking to psychologists. They are doing theoretical work. You are saying, let's apply these theories in practice.
Yeah.
In the
And I would
practical world
present
of
at
social work.
ABSI also.
Yeah. Oh, you were presenting both
Some
spaces.
I presented both spaces.
Interesting.
I'm also ASCAP, Association
Yes.
of
Study of Classical African
African
Civilization.
Civilization. Yeah, I
Mama
presented
Shibu Haru.
and it was like, man, I'm amazed at all these dudes, and sisters.
Yeah, they were going
Yes.
hard. ASCAP goes hard.
Yes. So, I present there.
Interesting.
And the black social workers, I was told people came just to hear because it was a new perspective
Right.
for them.
Right. And there are issues on the ground in the community
Yes.
that they need to address, and they're looking for new approaches.
They
Tools that
were
can
coming
use.
from a black perspective,
Right.
which it wasn't meant initially when Doug Glasgow started. He wrote the book on the black underclass,
Okay.
all right, that looked at the sons of wives,
Mhm.
work, which is a whole another piece. He wanted to be more, how do you develop, he and I just had this conversation the other day, a black community. Billingsley, Richard, what's Richard's last name?
You mentioned Richard Wright earlier. but
No.
Richard King.
No. This is a social
Richard
worker.
King,
This is a
a social
social
worker.
scientist.
Okay.
That's probably not as well known. But anyway, they presented more as an integrationist piece.
Got it.
How do you get the job in
Yes.
the white world?
Right.
Right? And that's the black perspective that really took more dominance.
Yes.
So when I'm starting to present this Afrocentric piece, I'm using, what happened was there was this international conference that was put on, and it took place in Trinidad with the Upside Down Hotel. It's still there. In other words, the main interest was in the,
Okay.
And so I am the savant for Wade. Have you ever heard Wade lecture? Where'd you get the words from, Wade? Where'd you get that? Let me lift this shit up. Right? But that was interesting because then you had what was King's first name? You had a lot of the psychologists, especially who were working at King Hospital in LA, and they actually put out a book that I got ripped off for twice, but I made copies of. I don't even let people see it anymore, right? That looked
That's
at.
not the big book, the Black Psychologist book, is it?
No,
Okay.
it's not that. It's not that. It was a book of essays in which Vern Dixon really put together this concept where he compared Eurocentric and Afrocentric piece.
Okay.
And that gets into where I look at Eurocentric as being anti-humanistic
Right.
and Afrocentric as being humanistic. And I use his model to look at the different indices.
Excellent. Welcome back. This is the second part in the two-part interview with Brother Dr. Aminifu R. Harvey. Again, my name is Brother Dr. Dennis Rogers, and we're having a wonderful conversation. We're going to talk about some of the publications that Brother Aminifu has had, his writings. But before we do that, we're going to revisit his notion of the Green Book and how it was utilized in his earlier days with his family to travel. Could you talk to us a little bit about the Green Book?
Not the Green Book. But also, what I wanted to say, but you're a scholar in your own right, so I feel honored that you're taking the time to interview me, and in the future we're going to have to switch this around.
Yes, sir.
Okay?
I'm open to that.
So the Green Book. Well, my family did that migration, the Great Migration,
Right.
from Louisiana up to Jersey City. And there's stories about that. When we were in elementary school and high school, my father's mother and brother still lived in Louisiana.
Okay.
So we would travel from Jersey City to Louisiana. You could not stay in these motels or eat in these restaurants. So the Green Book had a list of all the motels in every state, including D.C.,
Yes.
where you could stay in the motel. And some of the motels were like, no, we ain't staying here. This is like by the hour. Okay?
Right.
But we did use it. A lot of times we packed lunch, but depending on where we were going, your food was gone. So you had to go somewhere. I can remember my father actually going around the back or somewhere. The Green Book was extremely helpful. Probably saved people's lives.
Right.
You know, not going to this motel, knocking on the door, and the Klan ran it. Very, very helpful. But we did use it, and we used it on numerous occasions. Actually, I'm not sure if Howard University was in here, but I remember one summer we actually stayed in the dorms.
Wow.
So,
Wow.
the Green Book, most people probably don't know about it, but I do remember it.
Right. Right. Excellent. Thank you for that, for sharing. And in addition to the Green Book, Brother Dr. Aminifu R. Harvey has been published in this interesting text called Not Our President.
Yeah. By Third World Press.
By Third World Press. The editor, founder, Haki Madhubuti, and some of your colleagues who are also in this book, Herb Boyd, Bill Ayers, Mitch Landrew, Ishmael Reed, Julianne Malveaux, Maulana Karanga, Jared Ball, basically a pantheon of
And
scholars.
I think, if I'm not mistaken, see who did the introduction.
Okay.
So it surprised me.
This introduction is Cornel West.
Yeah, which was, yeah.
Right.
With some of his perspectives on Afrocentric.
Yes.
Yes.
So how did this project come into being? And let's talk specifically about your contribution to it.
Okay. Haki and I are friends. We're good friends. For many, many years.
Yes.
Haki had kept asking me, you need to write something. You write something, I'll publish it. Haki, Third World Press ran when it was private. ran into some financial problems. Haki called me up. He was looking for some donors. At that time, I had a little bit of money, and I invested in it. The return, anyway, Haki Thorough Press now is a foundation.
Excellent.
Right, which I think is better for them.
Right. They'll be here for a longer haul.
Yes, and it's easier to get people to contribute and all because they can write it off on the income tax and you can get other grants, etc.
Okay.
Haki calls me up and said, "Hey man, I'm putting Haki and I go back in which I brought when I was doing African American contributions to social work conference at the University of Maryland School of Social Work. I invited Haki as a keynote speaker.
Excellent.
Haki also had me when this group was doing these like African rituals. These poets were, and white poets, and he couldn't make it. He asked me if I would go in this place. So we've helped each other out over the years. And he called me up and said, "I'm doing this book on Trump and his administration. Can you write a piece?" I said, "Sure." So I don't. Do you remember the exact title? The title's something like "The Republican Party, a Party of Hustlers and Pimps."
That's it.
Featuring Donald Trump. And I looked at the first part of his early administration, and I'm saying, "Damn, all these people are gone." The only two left are Boyce, the lady that heads up the Department of Education.
Yes.
And who's the brother?
Boyce.
Yeah, Boyce, and then the surgeon. The brother.
Carson. Dr. Ben Carson.
Hood.
Yes.
I don't know why he kept them, but everybody else is gone. And I'm saying he was hustling his own party.
Right.
But my piece on that says, if you're going to deal with somebody who is unethical, immoral, you must come from a moral and ethical perspective. And the morality, and that's who African people are, spiritual people. Sometimes some of us have gotten lost, but we're really spiritual people. Excuse me. So, I'm aware of the 42 admonitions, as Ron Karenga calls them, or they have others, coming forth by day, coming forth by night.
Negative confessions of my eye. Yes. Yes. So,
but it's easy to see that the 10 Commandments come right out of there.
Right.
So I looked at those and said, okay, here are guidelines for us to be moral and ethical people. And then Jesse, Howard, and I begin to develop Likert scales by which you can really evaluate yourself. Jesse, got to cut for a minute.
Take a break for a minute.
I don't know where.
The Likert scale that you were developing.
Yeah, the Likert scale, yeah. Because I also begin to recognize there are people who say they're Afrocentric. I don't get into that discussion. That I know well enough to know. Brother, sister, you wear that gele, you wear that dashiki. But I'm not sure you is. All right? You might have a commitment to black people, but you also must be a more ethical and moral person. And I said, here's some guidelines. We need to put some guidelines together. We need to put some standards so that we can really evaluate ourselves and evaluate other people from the perspective they truly come from. So that was my purpose in writing that article. And that's in that book.
And is it your point of view that that those who are elected can operate from a Ma'atian perspective, from a perspective of the value system articulated in Ma'at?
Oh, yeah. I mean, you have to be willing to do battle sometimes, but you're gonna do battle anyway. If you run away from stuff, you keep running. You get exhausted and die from running.
Right.
So confrontation sometimes, and you have to figure out how you do the confrontation when you do it. But you cannot have a country that's immoral and unethical. And if you look at this present administration, he lies. First of all, he lies all the time. Statistics show just the opposite of what he's saying. Like he said that he has given the most raises to the military and the highest raises. That's so totally not true. Under the Obama administration, military got raises every year. The highest one came under Obama. And then I laughed the other day when he was saying that during the Revolutionary War, they closed down airports and the airplanes helped to close down. What is this, Revolutionary War? Come on, man. So
there were planes in the Revolutionary War in 1776.
if you're an immoral, then you become an immoral country if you have immoral leadership. So that's my piece, and it lays out what morality is.
Yes. Interesting, exciting. So this book came out in 2017. We will get to your other work that came out in 2018, but in 2019, you were part of a production of a reader, The Black Panther Paradigm Shift or Not, a collection of reviews, essays on a blockbuster film edited by Hakeem Adabudi and Herb Boyd. How did this particular work come into being?
Well, we got to go back a little bit.
Okay.
I moved to Durham because I was tired, and I was hiding out. Right?
Right.
So I'm teaching at Fayetteville State.
Oh, excellent. Fayetteville State, the Broncos. Yeah. Go Broncos.
And yes, and one of the things I wanted to do, I knew that within 10 years I was going to retire. I said, whatever knowledge I've gained, whatever ability I've gained to teach and role plays I've developed, etc., I would like to share that with a majority black audience, students.
Yes.
So when I got hired by Fayetteville State as a full professor, tenured. That was an interesting experience at Fayetteville State, but it was really great working with the student population. Students told me I was intimidating. I said, nice little, I'm not thug no more, y'all. I'm not a semi-thug anymore. So I called some of them into my office,
yes.
And I asked, what do you mean? They said, you know too much. I said, what? They said, yes, you will not accept a one-word answer or one sentence. You will ask, how did we arrive at that conclusion? What's our theoretical orientation? Those are the kinds of questions. I said, don't you feel blessed to know that you're being taught with somebody who knows the field? I said, then if you feel intimidated, why are you taking me for a second time? Because I know I'm not an easy grader, but I read every word.
Right.
They said, because we learn in your class. So what happened as I began to think about it, I said, I'm not writing. I have one more scholarly manuscript we're getting ready to get out. I'm not writing for the scholars. I'm writing for people, everyday folk. So somehow at the same time, because the universe works in harmony, I get a call after I write this book, A Read on Afrocentric Theory and Practice. Hakeem calls me again. He said, we're doing a piece on the movie. Why don't you write an article? I said, okay. So, do you have the name of the article?
Let's see here.
I think it's on the second page.
Right. It is Black Panther, Reflections about the Movie, a Historical and Mystical Symbolism Phenomena.
Yeah. I spent time in Oakland, as I said before, during the summers.
Yes.
So as I watched the Black Panther movie, I said, oh, it's taking place in Oakland, California. There's this relationship, as they talk about it in the movie, between the actual Black Panther Party and the movie itself. As they develop the movie, if you go through it, you can pick out the relationship. And having known some of the people in the Black Panther Party, having had some association with them, I understood some of they're a socialist group actually. They're not a revolutionary black group, but they're a socialist group. And what I liked about the Panther Party itself, theoretically, the theoretical piece is that they saw the equality between male and female in there. Every committee, now whether it got actualized, that might be different.
Okay.
And whether somebody else who becomes part of it, I ain't mentioning no names right now.
Okay.
All right? But that every committee had male and female on it.
Interesting.
And Elaine Brown, becomes the leadership in it when the leader of the Black Panther.
Huey P. Newton.
When Huey P. Newton goes to jail.
Yes.
And then, if you look at the history of the Black Panther Party, you will see that many of the social programs they started, the federal government modeled after them.
Right.
Loads of them. You take the free breakfast program.
Free breakfast program started with the Black Panther
Yes.
Party.
Working with seniors, providing medical services for seniors.
Interesting.
Transportation for seniors.
Interesting.
Tutoring and mentoring.
Right.
People don't look at that aspect of the Black Panther Party because they just saw them in quotes as a militant group. But remember, in California, when they were carrying the weapons and when they went to Sacramento, you could carry a weapon. You could have a weapon as long as it wasn't loaded. So they were not violating any law.
Right. They would actually state the statute
Right.
that gave them authorization to carry the arms, them being unloaded, of course.
Huey P. Newton was brilliant. Huey's downfall was drugs. That's how he got killed.
I am not qualified to. I'm responding to what you're telling me, and I know that among the audience and some that may view this in the future, that they may have opinions about the statement you're making.
And he might have got set up. But and I think what happened to the Black Panther Party, it spread so fast that they didn't have as much control over the different chapters as they really were. But the paper was very important, so I think the party itself was a very important piece in the development of the black community.
Yes.
All right, so when I get asked to write this, I looked at the similarities in the movie in relating to the Black Panther Party
Interesting.
as to some of what the movement was in terms of the movie when they wanted to develop programs in Oakland.
Okay.
Right? Towards the end, remember he says, I bought these 2 buildings here.
Yes, I remember that. I remember that at the end of the film.
And
where, quote unquote, the young man Killmonger lost his father earlier.
Yes, right.
And they revisited it, and it was still in some of the bad shape. Yes, right.
And also, so the spiritual part, there are a lot of symbolisms around Kemet. Let me go back. This equality piece I said between the genders, who the warriors in the movie are women.
Yes,
They're all women. Most of them are dark-skinned women. That's that whole issue of light skin, dark skin, especially in the movies. They all wear natural or bald heads. Remember that scene in the movie where she snatches a wig off, so I gotta get out of this, right? And they're strong, they're warrior type. Like, name me some strong warrior black women.
Historically, Nzinga, Queen Nzinga.
Yes.
You could argue in the arts, someone like the High Priestess of Soul, Nina Simone, right?
Yes.
In dance, you could go with Judith Jameson. In
So
literature, Audre Lorde.
These are all black women who are strong warrior type women in their own ways.
Yes.
There is this, that's what the black women are, warriors.
Right.
In the movie.
Right.
They're not castrating no black men, as sometimes warrior women are depicted as castrating us. I say, black man, stand up then. Shit, So, another perspective on black women in the movie, as the Panthers tried to do it theoretically. And then there's a lot of symbolism in terms of Kemet, which some people call Egypt, in there.
Yes. So let me just real quick here. The notion, you're saying that Black Panther Party theoretically sought to cultivate a male-female duality of leadership or participation, and then that secondly,
See, I don't like people
women
reinterpreting my
Okay,
words. I
okay.
use specifically words
So-
intentionally, but I go along with
I'm just gonna push back a little. So
Okay.
the pushback a little is, and I wasn't there during the Black Panther Party, is that that some members of the Black Panther Party had the same sickness that exists within the larger community,
Yeah.
and that the sexism piece played really hard in that revolutionary
And I'm not going to
space.
mention any names. There's one person in particular who's no longer with us who changed that. Who when that equality piece was really, they were struggling with it, came and said the only place for a woman is on their back. And I ain't going to mention no names. And that didn't come out of my mouth. That
I
comes
understand,
from somebody
I understand.
being
Yes.
directly involved
Yes.
in it. You know.
But there were women
But-
who pushed back against that, of
Yes,
course.
yes. And look at Elaine Brown
Right.
as the example, who does take over the party.
Were there men who pushed back against that as well, to your knowledge?
Well, I'm sure there were.
Okay.
I'm not in the party.
I
I'm not in the
understand.
party.
I
So I'm
understand.
talking to people who were in the party. I'm reading some of the historical pieces in
Yes.
there. I did some visits in there to the party. But you have to give them, and when you look at the movie, that's part of what they were doing. Remember, his sister is inventing everything. So they place women not on a pedestal, but they place women as being intellectually bright,
Responsible, that's right.
responsible,
In leadership.
warrior
Yes,
in leadership. So when you look at that, you begin to say, oh, they're not placing them in subservient positions.
Right.
As the Black Panther Party, you might have struggled against it, but when you look at certain positions, women were in leadership positions.
Okay.
As much as it might be a struggle. Remember, major American society at this time is oppressing women, and
Right.
specifically black women.
Exactly.
And we are part of it, and we did some of that ourselves.
Okay.
But the party tried to address it. You got to give them kudos for what they did or tried to do. Change does not come easy.
I hear you. So within the context of your article, and you're talking about Wakanda women, you actually do a roll call of Queen Sarah O'Nia of the House of People. You talk about Harriet Tubman. You talk about Ida B. Wells. You talk about the women of SNCC, Judy Richardson of SNCC, for example. And then you transition and you talk about Afrocentrism and Afrofuturism. Could you just expound on that a bit?
I don't know.
Okay.
Everything I wrote.
Well, let me just read the introduction of that piece, right? So you say key features in the movie is the respect for the ancestors.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Ancestor veneration.
Clear. You see that
And
in
the
the movie.
ability to communicate with the ancestors.
Yes.
Yes.
And that's when the protagonist, man, that's a shame. You get over here.
T'Challa.
Yeah, it goes
Right.
back. Right?
He went into the ancestral realm to speak
Now,
with his father.
check this out. Check
Okay.
this out.
Yes.
Christianity says Christ dies on the cross. Right? African worldview says yes. You go when you go into the underworld, and your heart has to be as light as a feather. All right, I ain't going. So he goes into the underworld. Supposed to be dead. Talks to his father.
Yes.
Said, "You killed your brother. We have to make what?
Make it right in so many words.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
This is your nephew. You left him out there." I have to go and make this right. So he goes into the underworld, he's talking to his ancestors. And he's putting them on Front Street. You were not right. We have to make it right. He is out there. That's why he is doing what he is doing.
Yes.
And that's what he tries to do. So he goes, talks to his ancestors. The mythology of us going into the underworld, right? You get some of that in Christianity where Christ dies on the cross and he goes into the underworld. So it's a transition. So that's some of the symbolism that I see. Veneration for the ancestors.
You also talk about in the movie, you talk about the women. A key African philosophical principle is inclusiveness and compassion, demonstrated when T'Challa fights with, again, his brother, his first cousin, who's the name I mentioned earlier. I don't want to keep using that name, but with his kinfolk.
Right. So that goes into 7 cardinal virtues of Ma'at. One's compassion. One is
Truth, justice,
and righteousness.
Reciprocity.
So he's not saying I'm using the 7 virtues of Ma'at, but if you know the 7 virtues of Ma'at, that's what he's doing. That's what he's actually doing in relationship to his cousin.
Mm-hmm. And you talk about another an Africanism is the use of African mask. One wears a mask in fighting to take on the energy of the animal here that mask represents, and to impart to the fighter its strength, skill, strategies, and tactics.
That's African culture.
Yes.
Traditional African culture.
Right.
So that's why I said there's a lot of symbolism in it. And I tried to write the articles because all of us might not know it, but to understand that we have a high culture, and that movie, to me, what makes it worth seeing and really great, because it does that. In some ways, it does it subtly,
yes,
but it does it. So in writing that piece, I wanted to point it out.
Excellent. And I see here that this is an intergenerational piece. I see Todd Stephen Burroughs. I see Jelani Cobb is here.
Mm-hmm.
I see
the book itself has
different essays by different editors. Very nice, very nice. Fred Logan. I think I saw Gerald Horn in one of these. That guy lives to write. He continues to write. So wonderful job again. Thank you.
And it's important that people get the books and read them. Make them part of your life. Make a transition in your life.
Yes, sir. So now let's talk about the reader of Afrocentric theory and practice, philosophical humanistic writings of Aminifu R. Harvey. And readers come after years, if not decades, of celebrated writings and presentations. So simply the fact that there is a reader is a testament to your contributions to the field. And I heard you say earlier that you really brought it to the social work community.
Yeah, Afrocentric theory and practice. Yes,
sir.
I did.
Yes, sir.
And I have the first article ever written I wrote. It was a proceedings from a conference, 1979, Conference on Black Social Work, and it's the first article in the book.
Wow, excellent.
Because somebody else published the book, and basically said that somebody else was responsible for it. So I said, well, let's put my legacy in order, but let's put the facts in order.
Right. So chapter 1 is black male-female relationships.
Yeah, and it goes into in-depth. It even talks about melanin in there, and it talks about this harmonious, what relationships should be like in terms of harmony. It uses Vernon Dixon's whole model, in terms of philosophical model that I...
Before we jump into it, can I back up just a minute? I see here that you did your doctoral work at Howard University.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, sir.
You did too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Fellow.
That was the first time I had ever gone to a HBCU in terms of, anything.
Yes, so could you share with us a little bit about your years at Howard and what it was like being in Washington, D.C. on Georgia Avenue?
It was a wonderful experience. It was great. It was Chocolate City back then.
Okay.
Wasn't gentrification. You had so many black bookstores. You had Ujima Shule, Pan-African schools, Watoto Shule, Roots. Ujima Shule had a bookstore.
Yes.
Nana Kwabena Brown had a black store. He's a Khan priest, which I'm a Khan. Man, I learned more talking to brothers and sisters in the community than I did in the class. The program was advertised, the doctoral program. I was in the third cohort, but it was advertised social work from a black perspective. I'm taking these courses. I say to Jay Chung, who had now taken over from Dr. Douglas Glasgow, really was probably a coup. Where's this black perspective, brother, that you all will advertise it? Oh, you have to take Dr. Glasgow's class. I said, but you advertised the program was black perspective. Well, him more. Black perspective was when you took Dr. Glasgow's class. And it was about looking at how do you enhance the black community, not necessarily how do you integrate into white community.
Right.
So that experience in class, but I learned. I did learn. By now, I'm this intellectual person you were talking about.
Yes.
I ain't never forgot the other part of it.
What time frame is this?
So I go back, I graduated in 83.
Yes.
I took the comps. So I'm taking the last test you test, get out. They told me I didn't pass the essay on groups. Now look, I ain't a good person to battle with, used to be anyway intellectually. I go back and check the book out and cite the stuff that they said wasn't correct. Here it is, right in the book. The book that you had in class, us to read. They didn't like sort of my revolutionary perspective. So, okay, so that's a delay. But I was the third.
But they couldn't denounce the work.
No.
They couldn't denounce
but
the
scholarship.
scholarship.
But they didn't pass it.
Interesting.
Oh, I had to take it over.
Okay.
So I just get more citations. Okay. So that was okay. It took 5 years, but that's all right. I mean, I'm finished. I'm gone. And DC, my children went to a Pan-African school, Watoto Shule. Ujima Shule on Friday night had family night. You name the scholars, and they all came on family night.
Wow.
Just name it.
Wow.
It doesn't, I mean...
From Francis Cresswell Singh to Baron Shango to...
Shaka Musa Barashanga, one of the brightest people I ever knew in my whole life.
Right.
Okay. Who actually published, well, he didn't publish, but printed the first edited book I had.
Oh, wow.
Way back in the 80s.
Wow.
Afrocentric black family perspective.
Interesting.
Um,
And Baron Shango was known for his works on African people and European holidays.
Right. One of the books, yes. You can go on YouTube and you can see some of his lectures now. So name some of the scholars that you would, especially historical folk.
Right. So out of not Paul Coates, not Ta-Nehisi Coates' father.
Yeah, well,
who
Paul
was in
Coates said
Baltimore.
classical black.
Right. Black
press.
classic press.
Yes.
There's another.
But name some of the history folk.
So in history, wow. Now I'm not a historian, I'm a political scientist, but I'm going to go with, again, Naeem Akbar is my guy, African Citizen scholars. Asa Hilliard. Asa Hilliard. You had.
Who's the brother that passed about 2 years ago that said heaven is in the...
Oh, you're talking about Dr. Yosef Ben Yaakov?
Yes. He came. He
Dr.
was one
Ben.
Dr. Ben was one of the people who came through.
Marimba Ani.
Yes.
Let the circle be unbroken.
Those are the people that you had on family night.
Yes.
It was vegetarian, or they would show movies. So it was like, hey.
Wow.
Yeah. And I knew some people. There was this one brother. I can't remember his name now. He was a photographer for Walter Reed Hospital.
Wow.
You could ask him what happened 1946 on June 12th, and he could tell you what happened in the whole world. These are the people who we never know.
On the scene, yes.
But they could just really...
You make me think about Baba Oduno Tariq big, tall, maybe 6, I don't know, 6'7" or
I
so.
know Duno.
Yes.
I know Duno.
Yes, and he's
I would
a
tell Duno
community
I'm
historian
writing this
in
paper
Washington, D.C.
on the UNIA.
Yeah. Remember
His
the
family
UNIA?
came out of UNIA.
Yes.
He was still in UNIA.
That's right.
I'm still in the UNIA. I was
Okay.
in social work, the social well ambassador to UNIA.
Wow. Wow.
So I go to Duno. I said, man, I'm writing this paper. He said, come to my house. Well, yeah. He had every paper that was ever
He
published.
got it. That's
I wrote that paper. A friend of mine, I sent it to her to look at. Years later, she said she's writing a book.
okay.
She said, remember this paper?
That paper you wrote.
That paper, okay, so I'm writing this paper. There was a piece in the paper I knew was missing. I go to Dr. Glasgow, who's now teaching this course on the Black perspective. I said, man, I know there's a piece missing before I hand it in to you. He said, my parents live in Jersey City. I'm in D.C. He said, well, you can go up to the Schoenberg Library and I'm sure you'll find it.
Mm-hmm.
Right across from the Harlem Hospital, right?
Right. Right.
I go to my parents' house the next morning. I go to Schoenberg, found the piece
Nice.
that was missing.
Nice.
That paper eventually got published
Excellent.
in the scholarly journal.
Excellent.
So you're talking about persistence. He probably wouldn't have known that a piece was missing, but I knew.
Right.
So that piece, and I thank Duno for the fact that he let me look at all the back publications. The papers.
He was literally an unofficial professor at Howard,
Yeah.
based on his sharing and
Yes, right.
his
right.
grasp of historical facts that
Right.
he would just continue to pour into students,
Yes.
whether they were doctoral students like I was at the time when I met
Mhm.
him, or master's students or undergrad students.
Yes.
Yeah. What about Baba Duku and Kwaku of the Blue Nile?
Yeah.
And
Duke
some of
still
those
runs the
businesses
Blue Nile.
there. Pyramid Bookstore,
Hodari Ali.
Yes.
Well, my good buddy, who's an architect, designed the Pyramid Bookstore.
Oh wow.
Yeah, you know the piece they have out
Right.
front.
Right.
The black community, nobody went around talking about who they were. But yet so many people who had all sorts of college degrees did all sorts of great work in the black community. You know, that we learned from each other. It truly was a community. And at that time, like you said, Pyramid Bookstore, Blue Nile, which is still there.
Jewels of Aton, House of Commit,
All those, so
Tape Connection.
we saw
all those
all
places,
African black
businesses.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. They made up the Nile Valley Business Association. Even with the Soul Vegetarian Restaurant, the Black Hebrew Israelites.
Yeah, that began to come a little later. The Hebrew Israelites had their store.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you never had to see a white person. It was all black community.
Right.
And it was Chocolate City.
Right.
And Mayor Barry, first two administrations, because it came out of SNCC. SNCC had some of the brightest people in the world. They knew how to organize.
Right.
They knew how to organize.
Yeah.
His first two administrations was so helpful to the black community. He's not getting credit for it because, later on, as he gets busted for drugs, etc. It was probably one of the better times in my life.
Excellent.
And I just learned so much. Like I said, my children went to the Pan-African schools. My children now, if you see them walking, you might not know, but my youngest daughter, Safia, goes to the Honors College, St. Mary's Honors College in Maryland.
Yes.
That's about all. Anyway, she said, I'm sitting in the audience and here comes this African dance troupe. Next thing I knew, I'm up on stage with my pad knee dancing with them. And Malkia, who's the artist, who I've shown you some of her work,
Yes.
probably one of the better teachers, and I don't say that because she's my daughter, that you can find. So when she teaches art, and she'll say where this country, where some of the art comes from, she's teaching the geography of it, she's teaching the leadership, she's teaching what kind of minerals they have, and she's focused on focus on the 3 A's. Affection. You want affirmation and association. You use those 3, you're not going to have problems in your classroom. So anyway, so Haki says to me, over the years, I need you, if you write your own stuff, I'll publish it right away.
Right.
So I'm looking at Frances Welsing's work, the ISIS papers. They come out of her lectures. I say, why don't I put it together, a compilation of my work? So many of the works in there have been published in scholarly journals or books. Some of the works have never been published, and they're published in there. There's an article in there on reparations. There's an article called The Mentality of Abusive and Killer Police.
Ooh.
That comes from more of a psychodynamic perspective, but it goes into detail about their fear of them, how that gun becomes like their penis, the power thing. And I give an example of a guy that when I was in the military, we went to MOS, military school. He ain't had no heart. He winds up being a cop in LA. But to get into the records room, you had to be some kind of correctional person, a policeman, probation officer, parole agent. I see him in there and I go to speak. He says something like, "Oh, how do I know you? Did I arrest you?" I'd look at him and I'd just walk away. I said, "That's your racism." And then I said, "You had no heart when we were in the military. You weren't a punk, but you didn't have heart. It is that gun on your side that makes you the big man." So all your fears and myths about us come out. First of all, when you stop us, you're afraid. Your fears come out. All your myths about how dangerous we are. So the pieces really talks about their psychology.
Interesting. Timely. In lieu of Black Lives Matter.
And what we must do to confront it.
You mentioned here, lastly, Black Lives Matter need to encourage black people to vote and to run persons for office who are from their communities and have their best interests at heart. There's a group called Black Voters Matter, and they literally took a page out of the playbook of Black Lives Matter. In fact, they were there, the founder, LaTosha Brown, was there with the young lady that founded the Me Too movement.
Okay.
So your point is very well made.
See, and I look at voting as a strategy. It's not the end, it's a strategy.
Yes.
And maybe it is the lesser of two evils. But you damn sure didn't want this person to get in. And that's only the reason he got in, because almost 50% of the people who could vote didn't vote.
Well, let's talk a bit now as we round the corner about the humanistic perspective.
So, when I began, and like part of my presentation is comparing, I didn't want to say Eurocentric, Afrocentric, because that sort of can turn people off. But I look at these two models. I look at Vern Dixon's model, and I think he uses axiologies, which is values. He looks into values.
Kind of a spectrum of values from this one to
he does. Well, yes, but axiology means values.
Okay.
What are your philosophical values? What's your worldview based on values?
Okay.
And then looks at time. This thing, activity and epistemology is like epistles, how you learn, how you teach. And then logic. So if you go back to the philosophers, European philosophers, you can read their work. if you look how it gets manifested, you begin to see even, I was looking at Robin Hood, the one that has Jamie Foxx in it.
Okay, I haven't seen this movie.
Oh, you got to see it.
Okay.
Because it's a critique on the Catholic Church and its early development in its relationship with the royalty.
Interesting.
And how they oppress the proletariat. If you want to use Marxism, Marxism
Terms. Okay.
terms.
Mm-hmm.
But their value, if you look under axiology, is that human nature. It's based on individualism and the controlling of nature. So if that is your value, and fear. Maybe it goes back to that whole Diop's piece on the two development of cultures. Mm-hmm. Eurocentrics develop in a culture in which you fight to survive, coming out of Caucasoid Mountains, right? You're surviving in those harsh winters. You have to control your environment. You have to put things aside. And the fear, you have fear that anything or person unknown to you might take what you have, right? Because it's strictly survival.
Including your life.
Yeah, or your supplies, or your food, whatever that you put away.
Okay.
Then if you juxtapose that to look at what we call humanistic Afrocentric, you come out of a culture in which your environment is full. If you happen to be a meat eater, it's there. Easy to grow food. I mean, if we know the Nile overflows and makes the land very fertile. Okay, so it's not
be another crop, right? You don't have to be as fearful.
Right, so it's not a hard survival environment.
Yes.
And the focus in this anti-humanistic is on individualism, controlling other folk. From a humanistic perspective, the world is communalistic. It's that you help each other to survive. I'm not saying it all gets implemented even on the continent today.
Okay.
But that's its basic philosophical orientation.
Right.
So it comes out of a community perspective. And I look at, for example, my parents, who are always helping other folk, and I'm looking at some of my notes, and it's harmony with nature. It's how do you figure out not to control nature, but to live in harmony with it? Why are we having this whole piece on the environment now? Because we've raped the environment. We've taken from it. Dances with Wolves. Remember the movie Dances with Wolves?
I do.
Native Americans said the buffaloes are our friends. First of all, we don't kill baby buffalo. Mm-hmm. We only kill what we need, and we use every piece of it, right? Europeans said, we just going to take the skin and sell it. They leave the body there to rot. It is a misuse of nature. So it is, when I had Lucky, the dog I talked about, I dealt with Lucky like he was my friend. I ain't kissed Lucky, he's still a dog, all right? Mm-hmm. But Lucky we had a relationship where Lucky said, I'm going to be your protector if necessary. Because you take care of me. Right. You don't abuse me. I didn't have to spank Lucky for him to learn not to, to be housebroken. Time for you to go out, man. He come to work with me and sit under my desk. Mm-hmm. So if you come from a perspective of controlling nature, then you're fearful of people who don't look and act like you, and you must control them. Right. That's the oppression that we see worldwide from a Eurocentric perspective. We might see some countries trying to address it, but historically that was the rape, that it was and is the rape of Africa. That's the whole enslavement piece. And sometimes we identify with the enemy, which is too bad, and we do some of the things the enemy does. But that humanistic piece, it's human to human. So my friend that said, do you know all these people? We will, no, but you reaffirm their humanism when you speak to them. The coldest thing you do is to ignore somebody.
Act like they don't exist.
Act like they don't exist. And understand that it's this circle, so you're an expert in this or really knowledgeable, vice versa. We share our knowledge. We share the food. We used to not have to lock our doors. Because if you were in need, you just had to ask. Or if I saw you in need, I would give. The destruction of human beings comes when you have to lock your door because you don't go out and interact in the world with other human beings and become fearful of them and they're fearful of you.
So when you have neighbors that live right beside each other but they never speak, that's a reflection of that particular value you're talking about.
And so when I moved to my house in D.C., I went and introduced myself to all my neighbors. Mm-hmm. And I said, you don't have the right to hit my children, but you have the right and I have the expectation. If you see them doing something that's not, in quote, kosher, right, let me know. Right. My children said, we can't go anywhere. Everywhere we go, people know you. I said, yeah, but they talk about how well-managed you are. But they're your protectors so that people know you. So if anything negative would go down, they would be there to make sure you're okay. You know, that's that whole piece. And what's interesting is I want to talk a little bit about logic. It's a piece on either or. Either you're good or you're bad. Either you're black or you're white. That's very Eurocentric.
Right, the binary.
You know, that's not the way the world is. There's all sorts of in-betweens in there, right? And if you accept that initial syllogism, Mugabe, who was really a good president when he first came in, he came to Howard University, he was lecturing, and he said, if you want to understand something, question the initial premise. So you look at a simple syllogism, if you accept the initial premise, all bald-headed people are smart. That's the initial premise. Okay. If you accept that, Aminifu is bald-headed, therefore Aminifu is smart. Or if you accept the initial premise, all black people are thieves, all Hispanics are rapists, criminals. Juan is Hispanic, therefore Juan is a rapist and criminal. Question the initial premise. Most of the time, it is not either or. It's not objective. There are probably some people who might be racist, rapists, but they're not the vast majority, any kind of way you want. That is not, you don't make the rule for the exception. You make the rule for the majority. Okay. So that either or logic is very dangerous. And people need to learn to be critical and analytical thinkers and problem solvers. That way you become a more humanistic person. And this whole piece on time, my youngest daughter does home visits for people with disability, a lot of seniors. You got X amount of time to make that home visit, like an hour, let's say, or sometimes 45 minutes. You're going to ask a black person to establish trust with you in 45 minutes. Once they do, 45 minutes they're going to be, oh, you're in the midst of telling me your life story like you asked me to begin. Oh, I'm sorry, I got to go. Come on. Time begins to set you up to be very mechanistic. Yes. What happens when you have to take a test? You might be able to answer all the questions correctly, but you only have an hour. So you never recognize anybody's true brilliance. People take different time to develop. The calendar says it's summer, but it just snowed. You tell time by nature, not so much by artificial,
barriers established by evidence.
Yes. So this concept of being humanistic, it's a very important concept. It focuses on justice and equality and how we help each other to survive. I did a little piece on economics. Top 1% own something like 90% of the resources in America. At what point with all the development of technology will you have nobody around to buy your products? The base of stabilization is widespread.
Right.
So that if you paid each person a wage that allowed them to buy a house, you would sell a whole lot more houses, a whole lot more cars. Because there's only so many cars even the rich people are going to have. You can buy a house, but there are only so many bathrooms you're going to have in it. The economy is better off when you have the people on the bottom making better wages that allow them to purchase items. Your business company is going to be more stable because you have a larger production and you're still going to make money.
So the theory that you're articulating of humanism, it works in the sociological space, it works in the economic space,
Yes.
it works across the quote-unquote divisions or genres that is society.
Yes. And it is not, it's a philosophical orientation that can be implemented.
Okay.
It should be, but it's not contingent upon your ethnicity, because your favorite psychologist even says this.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody can have that philosophical orientation.
Right.
You know, it might be, and that's something we need to recognize. I mean, I look at the civil rights movement, and too often it's either or logic comes in. All white people. There were a whole lot of white people in that civil rights movement, especially early on. You know, even in SNCC.
Exactly.
Even in SNCC and early on.
I've not so much heard the civil rights community say either or. In fact, I've heard with the people that you mentioned Dick Gregory earlier, he opened the canopy to the point where, for him, civil rights included LGBTQ.
Yes, wait a minute.
Okay.
But early on, I'm talking about people who talk about it now. And at the point that SNCC became a non-multi-ethnic group, the split, all right? It's when, what's his name, Black Power person, how could I forget his name?
Stokely
Carmichael.
Carmichael. Yes.
Yeah, Stokely. When he takes over, I don't want any white people in SNCC. You can go back and look, it's true.
Okay.
It's true. But so you'll hear people today, I'm not necessarily talking people who were in SNCC or the people who were involved in the civil rights movement then, but you'll hear people today that probably really don't know talk about just all white or all black folk. And the reality is there was a multi-ethnic movement, especially in the very early beginning.
Because even there's some video footage of Fred Hampton preparing for a trial with a community-based, group of folks, and he's walking through some of the misnomers about the Black Panther Party. And one of them is, he says, they don't believe in a segregated society as such, but they believe in brown power for brown people, red power for red people, yellow power for yellow people, black power for black people, all power for all people.
And each one has a different situation, but they all come together in terms of, because it was basically a socialist organization.
And in that space, the physical people on the video footage, I was shocked when I saw it, included young Caucasian people that were a part of the educational process.
Because in that democratic, part,
SDS you're talking about?
SDS was
Students for Democratic Society? Yes. Interesting. So in the humanistic approach that you're positing, the book reads an Afrocentric reader theory and practice, philosophical and humanistic writings of Aminifu R. Harvey. The humanistic writings comes from quote-unquote an Afrocentric perspective, but there's a universality to it.
Afrocentric perspective, the true Afrocentric perspective is universal. It's humanistic. It's not anti-anybody, but it's saying here are the value systems over here. Let's be clear, and these are the value systems here.
Right.
If you ain't got them, even if you happen to be black, you're not being humanistic.
Got it.
Don't think just because it's Afrocentric that you say that you're Afrocentric or somebody says it, that you're really humanistic, that you're really following what Afrocentrals meant. We went back to the whole 42, whatever you want to call them, right?
Declaration.
And that's why we put that Likert scale together,
right?
So you can evaluate yourself and see where you really fall on, or the 7 principles, or the seven
cardinal virtues,
right?
Right. So then, is the foundational value system for the humanistic approach the 42 declarations of innocence,
that and the 7
as
principles,
articulated,
and there, there's some other pieces.
Okay, interesting.
Those are the main 2.
Interesting. So, do you think that others? One, do you think people that are unaware of the 42 declarations of innocence of Ma'at, or the 42 negative confessions, like you said, whichever way you want to say it, do you think they're capable of exhibiting a humanistic approach, just that they're exhibiting it unaware of the full scope of it?
I think human beings are capable of doing anything.
Okay.
And so, change, right? Change is on the circle. You hear some people say, I'm going to be able to tell by this child in the 1st grade where they're going to end up in jail. Bullshit. You set it up so they might end up. But you can't tell me that, and I know because I've worked with older children, adolescents, I've worked with adults. Change can take place anywhere on the circle. The interventions might be somewhat different depending upon the age.
Okay.
Brother that founded Crips.
I don't know his name, but the story I think.
So he's in jail.
Yes.
Right.
Because originally Crips, from what I understand, and I'm not an expert, was supposed to have been somewhat of a social organization that protected from.
Yeah, they were sort of modeling themselves on the Black Panther Party.
Okay.
And they were put together to protect the community. And
from police. From police brutality. From
anything negative that's going on in the community.
And then somewhere in there they flipped the script and they began to.
Well, because of like I said earlier,
the economic piece.
Not just the economic piece. It is that's later on with them. Initially, because of the way the police dealt with them. The way the police dealt with them.
Okay.
And then you get this rivalry going on. And I don't know all the history.
Got it. So here's the Bloods and Crips and all this.
Yeah.
So ultimately the leader that you're talking about, the founder.
What was this? Mookie?
I think it was Mookie. Mookie or something.
So he ends up in jail
in California.
And he has a death sentence. But he starts writing children's books.
Yes.
Schwarzenegger is
the governor, right? The governor of California.
It means black person in German.
Right.
He could have at least.
What do they call it? Commute the sentence?
Commute the death penalty.
Yes, commute the death penalty.
But here's this brother who's changed. Who's writing children's books.
Yes.
That's a positive thing in the community.
Okay.
You could have let him live. But you wouldn't commute his sentence.
And he was operating under a particular value system when he made that decision not to commute the sentence.
Of course. That's the control piece.
Okay.
That's the example. That's the impression.
Okay.
That's the piece that keeps me in power. That's the unethical and immoral piece. Personally, I don't want to get too far off, but humanistically, I don't believe in the death penalty. I don't think that anybody has a right to take anybody else's life, even legally, in quotes legally. So I'm talking to somebody the other day. I'm in the barbershop. This lady comes in and she's clearly middle-class sister, older woman, coming in the barbershop to get shaped up.
Right.
But there ain't no doubt she's probably in the church, etc. Right? Sophisticated, no doubt. College, probably master's degree. Talking about some case, and she says they should go ahead and kill him. He's in jail, right? Give him the death penalty. No sense in him using up our tax money. I'm chuckling to myself. I'm not getting in this conversation. Baby, your tax money is used in all sorts of
ways that you are not aware.
Yeah. Too much. Too many SWAT teams. Your tax money. You go into the store to buy something. Your tax. Go online. You can get it a whole lot cheaper. As examples. So you're worried about this person using your tax money and you think they should be executed. So I'm talking to another friend. Yeah, I believe he should too. Have you read the 10 Commandments lately? Thou shalt not kill. And if you read Revelations, it's God that comes in and slays the folks. So if you believe in punishment, the greater punishment for you to be in jail all your life. So how can you say your commandment says, and then the other commandment in all religious groups says, treat your neighbor as yourself? So that's why I think it's anti-humanistic for you to take somebody's. I'm not talking, there are extreme situations in self-defense or defending your family and all.
Yes.
You know, but to execute somebody, and then what do we have today? You the exonerated 5, or what was,
The
before
young men who were up in New York who were
Central Park 5.
They made the movie about Ava DuVernay's.
And so what do we do? They were all innocent. How many black folk, or how many people in general?
Wow. Too many to name. Don't
Get-
even know them all.
Set
Later
up.
it's found out that they were actually innocent.
And some who never you find out.
That's correct.
And then with the DNA, at least we're fortunate how many people, because of the DNA.
We
Like,
reverse
that's what happened.
such sentences, exactly.
So to take somebody's life, where do you get the audacity to do that?
Is a non-humanistic value system in
And
place.
you want to control, you want to rule, that's where the oppression comes from. So no, I don't believe in it. I think it's anti-humanistic to take somebody's life.
Yeah.
And if you're supposed to be this good Christian, how are you going against one of your commandments?
I understand. So other ways that the humanism plays out in your theoretical construct are how? Or are there other elements of it you care to share with us?
Yeah, let me look. Epistemology, like the only way to know is through measurement, cognitive. That's the piece, but you can know through intuitiveness.
Right.
There's a whole spiritual world. There are mystics in the world. You got to measure everything. So measurement doesn't always tell you. When we would do research, we use quantitative and qualitative.
Okay.
Because you get one piece out of the quantitative piece. That doesn't tell you the whole story. Qualitative piece can tell you a lot more in terms of how you did what you did. If you look at my transcript that says the D in philosophy, ethics, but if you come and talk to me, which is more of a qualitative piece, you would see I probably had an AA+, but you don't know the circumstances.
For the written D there. So let me ask this question. How then does the humanistic approach change, if you will, the academy, higher ed? Because if our professionals are trained, our future teachers are trained in the higher ed space, but they're trained or educated with a non-humanistic approach, we get the output, the society we have now.
Right.
How does the institution look with the humanistic approach being implemented as well as taught in the classroom?
Okay.
At any given, you could name an institution
Good
and
question.
apply it to that one or in general.
In the fall, Central's radio station does in the community what they call conversations.
Yes, North Carolina Central University.
Yes,
North Carolina.
yes. I'm
Okay.
glad you explained it.
Yes,
Some people
okay.
might not know.
Yes,
You're
yes.
right. And what they do is they have a topic and they invite people like a round table, and it's broadcast live on the radio, and they have people in the audience.
Okay.
So we're in communications about doing something around education. I'm
Yes.
finishing up this evaluation piece. And what we found in doing, we evaluated the after school program that we had some input into.
Okay.
These children, low income African American, northeastern city, come to school and there's somebody dead in the schoolyard, as an example of how rough the area was.
Northeastern upstate, not
I ain't gonna
northeastern
tell
North
you, I'm
Carolina.
not telling you where it is.
Not North. Okay.
Oh.
You said northeastern, so
Yeah.
go ahead. Okay.
The
Okay.
South.
Wow. Wow.
Right.
Wow.
Northeastern, yeah.
Mhm.
after school program, these children, because of what we did, the way we did it, all the learning was very interactive.
Yes.
As an example,
Yes.
everybody got some kind of acknowledgement for what they did.
Excellent.
And I'll talk about 3As in a minute. Their grades improved, standardized tests improved.
Excellent.
On Fridays they had activities, and one was Tai Chi, the other dance.
Okay.
These are 1st to 5th graders. We do a qualitative piece, and they say, and this is the measurement piece,
Mm-hmm.
right? Where you wouldn't have known this. You wouldn't have known it when you did the quantitative, when you look at grades. One boy said, not one boy, number of them, and girls. I took Tai Chi. Tai Chi taught me discipline, because these are 1st and 5th graders. Because of the discipline, I did better in the class.
Mm-hmm.
My grades went up,
Mm-hmm.
and the parents were saying the same thing.
Okay.
What we saw was the 3As. And you talk about the humanistic part. 3As. Affection.
Mm-hmm.
Affection, teachers need to let children know they care about them.
Yes.
Man, Eurocentric piece, you can't touch. Don't even put your hands on them. You're not supposed to hug them. But they're healthy hugs. They're healthy ways to hug. Right? So we taught staff how to do that. Black folk, you and I were giving each other during the conversation, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's what we do. We affirm each other.
Right.
So if you're teaching, you need to teach the 3As. Affirm affection. How do you show affection to the children that you care? Because the black folk want to know that you really have our interests. I mean, that's real. Affirmation. Example. Had this math problem in elementary school. Went home and showed it to my father. He said, well, let's sit down and figure it out. We sit down and figure it out and get the right answer. I go to school, raise my hand. Yeah. Well, it's wrong. What do you mean it's wrong? Right answer. Well, you didn't do it the way you're supposed to. You mean tell me we came up with another way, and you tell me that's the only way to do it, your way?
Right.
If you want, you should affirm and say, that's good problem solving. That you found another way to do it. For this class, we need to look at this way. What happens with black children in class? They make a mistake. Children, teacher don't want to call them again. You have to affirm children and say, okay, maybe that's not the right answer. Or maybe you didn't look at it the right way. You look at, if a child says from set theory, you say 4 and 4 is 2, they say maybe not. If you're doing set theory, depending upon the category. If you're doing with fruit, maybe you have 4 oranges, 4 apples. You have them together, that's 8. But if the child says, well, nope. Set theory says you have 4 apples, 4 oranges. They don't look at the category of fruit.
Okay.
So you affirm what children do, and you're saying, good thinking through. Let's look at it another way, right? Instead of telling you wrong. And be interactive in how you teach. You want to teach English, you want to teach literature, let's do it through plays. When I worked in after school, I had an after school program. I took children to the pool hall, teach them basic physics. Inert object, force hits another inert object, that's physics. I told them, you already know physics. What we're going to do is for you to learn another language of physics. That's where you learn the formula.
Same in basketball. Right.
All of it.
Mm-hmm.
Here's a wall. You don't need to paint the wall. Here's X amount of money. You can keep whatever's left over. How do we know how much paint to buy? Because I wanted to get them excited about learning. And that's volume.
And
So there's a whole other way to teach. And the other is affiliation. Why do you think so many children go in games? Because of affiliation. They get affirmed in games. There's affection in games. You can counteract that. It's the 3A's. So when I talk about humanism, you're going to have less problems in the classroom. You're going to have children be more productive if you know how to do this and implement it.
is there an institution currently that utilizes the humanistic approach to education?
Well, I think a lot of Pan-African schools do, even if they could not just totally articulate it like I did
Okay.
when my children went to. And when you look at the Pan-African schools, and like this one here in Durham, hey, valedictorian in high school. most of the children that went to the Pan-African schools where my children went, they all went to college.
Yes.
And when you do the analysis of it, and I tell Pan-African schools you need to keep data, good data. The articulation between the teachers, the students, is the 3 A's. And the cultural piece that they focus on. Okay, you're going to learn about your culture. You know, that's important. I can identify with that. That's exciting for me to learn about who I am, because I'm an extension of everybody who went before me.
Yes.
Their blood's in me. And the potential of me being able to do this because it was done by people just like me.
Yes. So then if we're talking about higher education and we're talking about colleges and university students, there are, of course, students in their major fields and their divisions. But then you mentioned earlier, even you were president of a student organization.
Right.
So what would be the way to connect and the value for a Black Student Alliance at Duke University, a Black Student Movement at UNC Chapel Hill, a Black Student Group of Fraternity, Sorority, Panhellenic National Panhellenic Association groups, Divine Nine associations, on any given college campuses, having you to come in and share with them the humanistic approach? What would be the value and the impact upon how their organizations could operate with this new knowledge or this shared information that you would bring?
Well, I think one of the things you just said, the new knowledge, how do you implement your life as an example? How does in that organization, is there equality? Is there sharing? How do we deal with each other from a very humanistic piece? And understand, how do we push, if I say the 3 A's and you're in education, how do I push the university? Look, as an example, since we're talking about education, there's a lot of data and a lot of research on how to teach Black children.
Okay.
That Black children, because you have more right brain, that's the creative side. Education, what they do, they get rid of the arts and athletics first. So that if one understands this, even when you go out into your professional life, now you can, I would say, push that art and athletics stay in the school. You understand that the children are right brain. So now you teach from a different way. You teach from the perspective of problem solving and being to analyze. Elementary schools basically say the brightest children are the ones who memorize and give back. That's not what they do in Norway. Highest educational system in the world. They go for half a day. The other half of the day, the children are interacting with each other. So at least you know this piece here, and you know what you can do and how you can implement it. And now you understand that you can have this philosophical, or you can have this discussion or this debate with the university in terms of how they can better serve people. If you don't have this piece, if you don't know it, it's not that you might be doing it, but now it's a systematic way to articulate it based upon data, book, and also how is it, and we'll just take education, but it goes for psychology, it goes for social work, that you're teaching from this paradigm, and you're a PhD who's supposed to be doing research, but you haven't looked at the classical work of Black folk. It's out there.
Well,
Tolson.
Isn't that a function, though, of the knowledge gatekeepers, the professors, the instructors in the classroom, who basically say, here's the reading list?
But I'm saying you are the
An
professor.
individual. Oh,
no,
the
I'm
professor.
saying you're the professor.
Okay.
Part of your responsibility is to go and research.
Correct.
Right? So
Yes.
if you don't know about this material, well, you tell me that you wouldn't Google some stuff. You Google this stuff is out there. You should be looking for it. What are more effective ways to teach Black children?
Okay.
You can find the material is out there,
Yes.
But why haven't you included this other model as another model, as another paradigm in your educational curriculum.
So I'm going to go back to something you said earlier because I'm with you. I'm just trying to follow it through to on-the-ground implementation.
Yeah, sure.
So you said, in part, you served as a bridge of sharing ideas from the Association of Black Psychologists to the National Association of Black Social Workers. So you have the NAEPS, National Association of Black School Educators. You have, of course, NEA, National Education Association.
Yes.
American Federation of Teachers, and they work in K through 12.
And they all usually have conferences.
Okay, they do.
So you can present workshops at the conferences so that
train the people
yes.
to go back and implement the humanistic approach
right.
in their pedagogy, in their educational approaches.
Right.
In addition, I guess, because I really think of college students who are about to enter their professions.
Yes.
And I think of where is the space that the college students, quote unquote, control. So professors are dealing with college students, let's say 9 to 4. Usually not that long because students have only a couple of hours of classes. When the sun goes down on a college campus, those students are left to their own devices, literally from 4 p.m. until 9 a.m. the following morning. Exactly, depending on when you take the classes. So if the humanistic approach comes to a particular group on campus and is brought to them in a manner where they theoretically get it,
and examples of implementation.
That's where I want to go.
Then you can begin, if you're a college student, there's a lot of if you come from this perspective,
Yes.
Critical race theory, as an example,
yes,
is more.
It's rooted in humanism.
Yeah.
Okay.
So now you can begin to write your papers.
Yes.
From this perspective.
Right.
And have the documentation to support.
Got it. So within your reader, then there is, in addition to your research, I take it, footnotes, bibliography of scholars, references.
If you look at work,
in the humanistic perspective,
the publications have loads of references because I'm not going to allow you to challenge me on my scholarship.
Right.
You might have a different view, but I have the same education as you from your institutions, and I have the scholarship that's there. You might disagree with it, but you can't refute me on my scholarship.
Right. And one of the things that Naim Akbar said that I hear you echoing is that when you're in college, you read what they give you on the reading list for your courses, yet you also need to have a reading list that reflects the ideas that have historically come out of
So you look
our
at
community.
Pasteur and Tollerson's work, you look at Hale's work, they all have exactly what we're talking about. The documentation is there. Hale's work is her research dissertation, which how she applied it in a work. So the question becomes,
You speaking of Julia Hare, of Nathan and Julia Hare?
No.
Who Hare?
Hale, H-A-L-E.
H-A-L-E.
Yeah.
First name?
Why are you going to ask me first?
Okay, sorry about that. Hale.
Look it up on your cell phone right now.
Okay.
Or we can run upstairs and get the book.
Yes. Okay.
All right. So if you decide to write the paper, you can document it with research.
Got it.
It's there. Not only the book is in it, talk about the applied piece.
Right.
And some college professors, if they don't know it, are open to learning. They're open to say, this is another perspective I don't know.
Exactly.
I'll discuss it, talk about it in class. And I think you have more for these organizations. Go and present your papers. Present at the workshops, whether you're in college or in your profession, that opens up another way of viewing the world. People come to your workshop, and I know this from when I was dealing with the Afrocentric piece. Yeah, there's some people who came at me initially, but they came back and apologized. And they were big cheese in it, but I didn't let them stop me from what I was doing.
Right.
And so you think differently about your own life and your own interactions, but you can also begin to have a way to critique institutions. If you look at Georgetown, for example, that have slaves and sold slaves, now they want to do reparations. Okay? You never give up the battle. the material is out there to support your perspective on it. I hope that sort of begins to answer your question. I understand what you're saying, and I think that's very important. How do you apply it?
Right.
You know, when I put the book together, a lot of is not just there. I talked about how to take the theory and implement it. So a lot of more programs in there. One of the things, why are we doing this videotape? We're doing this videotape because we like to get it out to a larger audience.
Right.
You know,
that has the patience to read it or hear it in its entirety, and as we mix it and remix it, take different components of it that they can digest in that moment and work through that.
So when I lecture, it's the opportunity to answer students or whoever in the audience questions. I don't remember exactly what it was. I was doing Durham Library. I was doing a lecture.
Okay.
And after it was over, a friend came up. She said, "I was wondering about this whole thing on oppression, and you just explained it to me. Now I understand."
Excellent. Yes.
So it helps people to understand why certain things take place. And I know we're almost out of time, but one of the last comments I want to make, understand that people get grounded into their belief system, even when it doesn't make sense. And statistically, even sometimes it's hard for them to move from their belief system. Understand their belief system. Then you can begin to get into this discussion about, is your belief system valid? Good friend of mine, once again, said, I believe in the death penalty. He said, because I believe it deters crime. I said, okay, let's look at the states that have death penalty.
Okay.
Higher crime rate. Ones that don't have lower crime rate.
Interesting.
I said, so the death penalty does nothing to deter crime. It's proven. It's proven. He's still the one. So over time, though, he began to change his mind as he began to look, because he started going online, looking at his own research. He said, "You're right."
Right.
You know, and people can change, and I believe that people can change.
Okay.
Now I know there's some people that need to stay where they is. All right, but there's some other people who can make a difference in their life. If you look at that early part of my life, the semi-thug piece, well, look where I am now.
Right.
But I was not totally out there. And that experience that I had, you can change. I always tell people, you can have a negative experience like doo-doo. What your task is to take that doo-doo, change it into manure, so you can go grow flowers and herbs.
Fertilize, yes.
You can make the transition.
Okay.
Look at your own life and see how you can make it. It doesn't hurt for you to speak to people.
Right.
You know, say hello, even if they don't say hello back to you. But the majority of people probably will speak to you.
They will. So,
Equality and fairness.
okay.
You know, push for it. You see a lot of organizations, and I commend some of the athletes now who are creating schools. But make sure your schools are creating people who believe in equality, who believe in justice, who will fight for you. That's a very humanistic orientation.
Approach. Yes. Okay. Are there any closing remarks you want to make on humanism? Because I think what you said was perfect as a closing comment, but you may want to add some more. Any closing comments or anything else you'd like to share with us?
Well, I think
about
we
the
just
humanistic
I think
approach?
we just touched on it.
Yes.
You know, barely touched on it.
Okay.
I would like the opportunity to come and have discussions, lectures with anyone.
Oh, excellent.
You
You're
know,
available.
And because you don't see Jesse Howard because he's behind the camera, you know, videotaping this.
Right.
But Jesse and I put together a whole PowerPoint that's in detail on this presentation.
Excellent.
And also a more in-depth discussion on how you apply it. You know, in terms of not just in academia, your personal life, and even organizationally.
Perfect.
You know.
Perfect. And I think for those of you who are watching this video, the notion is that there's scholarship available. You have access to the scholar who can come and be available for either a lecture, a workshop, a forum that really brings this work to life in a manner that is digestible. They can ask you questions, Q&A, and even begin to think through, and maybe with your assistance, implement it in certain curricula or organizations or communities in order for us to have a
And some
healthier
people are doing it,
humanistic
they just don't
space.
understand it from a systematic perspective. A lot of times it reinforces what they're doing already.
Excellent.
And we will put this up on social media, and it will have the links,
Wonderful.
to it.
Okay.
So let me give my email address.
Yes.
It is henrypaul70a@gmail.com. But we're going to put it up on social media.
Okay.
I would also like to thank Jesse Howard. Jesse has been, he works on projects with me, 2 to 3 years now, Jesse? And I couldn't do some of the work that I'm doing without him.
Right.
So I really appreciate
Absolutely.
you coming, because you're a scholar in your own right,
Thank you, sir.
coming and doing this interview with me and asking those questions I probably never would have thought of
Right.
in the way that you asked them.
Thank you. You're so welcome.
Yeah, so it's been a wonderful experience.
Absolutely.
Yeah, creative blessed.
For both of us, for all of us. And for you, the viewing audience, again, we want you to partake of the research. John Henry Clark said, for those of you who want to continue to work, actually read the books. And upon reading the books, pick up where the scholars left off in the text and implement the ideas. Write the ideas of yourselves. Share this video with others. Watch it in groups so that we can make sure that this African-centered, Afrocentric, humanistic approach continues to be shared with others. Thank you again for your time and for watching this video to its conclusion, and we'll look forward to seeing you again.